of East Carolina University. So thank you so very much for being with us and for your patience as we took that news conference. So give us a sense of how bad the situation is for these hotel owners across the country.
Thank you, David. It's great to be with you. Listen, we're seeing really what all amounts to is a liquidity problem, and it's all due to occupancy. As travel has cratered across the United States, our members are reporting their occupancy rates are down 50%. Some of them are only seeing 10%, 20% occupancy. And so at the end of the day, they are small business people. Most hotels in America are franchises. So when you check into a Marriott or Hilton, you may be thinking it's something owned by the corporate guys, but no, it's Joe Hotelier in their local community running a small business. And so really at the end of the day, it's all about meeting payroll and paying the mortgage. And that's what is the crisis at the moment, because when your occupancy rates are so low, it's going to be hard after a few weeks' time to keep doing that. So that's what we're worried about, and why we're glad that the administration and congressional leaders are at least talking about some potential aid for hotel owners in the next round of legislation they're considering.
And in that news conference we just listened to, the president, he didn't absolutely commit, but he did say he thought that they were probably going to help out the hotel industry, which would be encouraging. Put some brackets around the problem. How much money and how fast do you need it? There's been some reports that the hotels across the country are losing something like $1.4 billion a week.
Well, it is. We're beginning to see closures, lots of layoffs, and of course this will have a ripple effect across the economy. When our hotels are empty, obviously the restaurants nearby, the retail establishments, they're not doing business either, and that has a great and profound effect upon the local economy. Our members are in every community across America, as you mentioned, over 20,000 of them. What we really are looking for, and we do hope we're going to get some help with, is just really some help with regulations so that our members can work with their bankers, their lenders, to figure out some common sense solutions for the short term, for the next 6 months, for example. But we need to make sure with the regulators and red tape not going to get in the way of that, and that those loans are not somehow going to become a black mark against the banks, and there's no incentive to work with borrowers. So we need some help there. We also need an infusion of capital because, again, this is a liquidity issue. And we appreciate some of the things we're hearing about the SBA loans, some of the other programs that are being discussed. But one of the real issues with all of that, of course, is, again, red tape, bureaucracy. This needs to happen quickly. We can't wait 6 months on this, because if we do, we're going to see a lot of hotels shuttered and a lot of people unemployed before we reach that period of time. So red tape, we really need to make sure bureaucracy is not getting in the way of that capital getting where it's needed in very quick fashion. And then the other thing, we're simply asking for no new burdens. I mean, hoteliers are by and large small businesses. The average hotel in America may have 40 employees. Larger ones obviously have many more. But we want to make sure they're not additional burdens that are going to, again, get in the way of liquidity and make it harder for these small businesses to meet the payroll and pay the mortgage.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I apologize, we squeezed you a bit. Please come back again, because we did have the president talking, but that is Cecil Staton of the Asian American Hotel Owners Association. And now we want to talk with one of the lawmakers who will be called upon to help determine what the size and the shape of that stimulus package might be. He is Congressman French Hill of Arkansas. He earlier served under George Herbert Walker Bush as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Treasury. So, Congressman, thank you so very much. You're a Republican from Arkansas. You want to give credit to your state there. Give us a sense of what you're looking at in terms of the stimulus package, the next one.
David, thanks for having me. I think you heard from Cecil. I think speed is the most important thing. We need flexibility to deliver short-term liquidity to our businesses across this country that are hurt by this public health crisis. So the express loan with the SBA that banks can deliver really in just hours and a few days, we need to expand that, the size. We need to expand the government guarantee of it and let community bankers serve their customers. Marco Rubio has been a leader on that effort in the Senate. That's a good idea. Cecil talked about red tape. The FASB rule, Financial Accounting Standards Board rule about troubled debt restructurings. If you change a payment or a term on a loan in the face of this pandemic, you could condemn that loan to being classified or or not being able to be used for collateral for liquidity through no fault of the business. This is purely because of this public health crisis. So that's an example of something I think we should tackle in the regulatory system.
You know this system so well, both as a congressman back in Arkansas and also as in the Treasury. Can we get money into the hands, because there are thousands and thousands of small businesses, there are so many across the country. Can we get them cash in their hands quickly?
The best way to get them cash in their hands is to free up the banking system to do it with some government additional guarantee in the small business or through Treasury, one of Treasury's facilities, to recognize that businesses have secured capital for their normal operations. And for the next 90 days, 4 months, this is not a normal operation. They're under severe stress to pay suppliers and keep their great employees employed and paid, something so important to our economy and to those families. So I think the banking system, freeing it up to act, is the fastest way to help the average small business and therefore those workers in all of our communities.
Let me ask you, Congressman, just a very specific housekeeping issue. How do you get 435 Congress people together right now when the president says we shouldn't be in groups larger than 10? Isn't there a real problem there? Is it safe?
Well, I think Steny Hoyer, the majority leader, Kevin McCarthy, minority leader, can have when we get back together to vote on this for action for the American folks, we'll do that in phases, David. We'll come in and vote in small groups. They'll hold the vote open. Constitutionally, we need to be in Washington to cast that important vote, but we can do it and comply with CDC standards, in my view.
Are you concerned about just traveling to Washington?
I'm not. I'm taking Purell baths on a regular basis.
So are we all, sir.
I love American Airlines and Delta Airlines. They'll get me to Washington and back, and I want to keep everybody to practice safe hygiene out there and protect their families.
And finally, just quickly, if we could, how is it back in Arkansas?
You know, people are taking it in stride, but our folks that work hourly, who work for tips, they're in a panic, David. So many of our restaurant entrepreneurs, our small businesses, our folks dependent on tourism and hospitality, our hoteliers you just heard about, they're struggling right now. And that's why I think the banks being free to help them and have some protection from the downside for this crisis is the best thing we can do to help all of our citizens.
Well, you identified one thing that New York City has in common with Arkansas right now, because that's what we're seeing here as well. Thank you so much. That's Republican Congressman French Hill of Arkansas. Great to have you with us today, sir. So that is going to do it for Balance of Power for today, having uncovered that presidential news conference and then some of the aftermath. I'm David Weston, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
This is WBBR New York, WDCH-FM Bowie, Baltimore, Washington, WJZ-FM HD2 Catonsville, WRCA Watertown, WBOS HD2 Brookline, Boston, WNBP Newburyport, KNEW Oakland, KOSF 103.7 FM HD2 San Francisco, and SiriusXM Satellite Radio Channel 119. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters in New York, I'm Doug Krisner. 1 p.m. on Wall Street, and the equity market is pushing higher as we digest a mass of monetary and fiscal measures aimed at easing the turmoil in financial markets stemming from the coronavirus outbreak. Earlier, the Fed established a temporary dollar liquidity swap lines with 9 other central banks. This will allow foreign central banks to meet the needs of companies and financial institutions in their domiciles rushing for dollars. We're seeing the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index right now up by about 1.2%. For the Dow Industrial Average, a gain of 1.3%. In the broader market, we have strength in energy shares today, leading the S&P higher by 1%. We've got WTI crude oil recovering following that 24% plunge yesterday. Crude in New York, 25.08 for a gain of more than 23%. Selected tech stocks pushing higher. Names like Tesla, Netflix, and Facebook. That's helping to lift the NASDAQ composite to a gain of nearly 3%. Let's take a look now at American depositary receipts, see how they are trading with Dave Wilson. Hey, Dave.
Hey, Doug. ADRs are rising more than U.S. shares. The S&P ADR index is up 1.8%, and the S&P 500 is higher by 0.8%. The gains that you mentioned, Doug, among oil stocks are carrying over to the ADRs of energy producers. Now that crude oil is coming off an 18-year low in New York trading. The UK's Royal Dutch Shell has advanced 11.5% in U.S. trading. BP is up 5.7%, and Canada's Imperial Oil has climbed 12%. Chilean ADRs are advancing after the government announced a stimulus plan equivalent to 4.7% of the country's gross domestic product. Banco Santander's Chilean unit has risen almost 14%, and power producer Enel Americas has climbed almost 15%. The UK's Micro Focus International has rebounded 23%. The software maker had fallen 55% in the last 6 days of trading. The steepest drop occurred yesterday when Micro Focus lost 26.5% as it scrapped a final dividend for 2019. Germany's Continental has dropped 14%. The auto parts maker is lower, along with car and truck producers, after a European trade group said passenger vehicle registrations fell 7.2% last month. February's decline followed a similar drop in January, Doug.
Thanks to Dave Wilson. In terms of eco data, we had first-time jobless claims jumping last week. Claims were up to a level of 2,800. I checked that 28,000 as the economy begins to show the effect of the COVID-19 epidemic. And separately, a gauge of regional manufacturing of the Philly Fed suffered its largest ever drop in the month of March. Obviously, we're dealing with the growing likelihood of a global recession, along with a spike in corporate defaults. In terms of the bond market today, long-term interest rates coming in with the 10-year Treasury now at 1.11%. I'm Doug Krisner. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Balance of Power.
We have the strongest economy by far in the world.
We need an economy that works for everybody.
I am the one who has the broadest coalition.
Where the world of politics meets the world of business.
They've got the money they need to run a very competitive race.
These lawyers brought the case, and in my view, they should be sanctioned. We want certainty in the markets. We want certainty in our trading relationships.
The administration is trying to create a new divided world.
Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, welcome to the second hour of Balance of Power. I'm Paul Sweeney, sitting in for David Weston. As David was just reporting, a volatile day in the markets today. We actually have some green on the screen here in the equity markets. One of the areas that we've been following very closely, really over the last several weeks, has been the global energy markets. We've received incredible swings in movements in crude oil. Yesterday, the biggest sell-off since 1982. We're getting a little bit of a bounce back here today in crude, but it's really important to get a sense of what the global energy markets are telling us about the global economy. Our next guest is perfect to help us frame that. Gaudat Balgat, professor of national security at the Near East South Asia Center for Strategic Studies, the National Defense University, and he's also the author of several books on energy. Gaudat, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time. We know it's been an incredibly volatile time looking at these energy markets in addition to the overall financial markets, but just give us a quick lay of the land where we are here in terms of global oil.
Thank you for inviting me. It is very much kind of perfect storm. This recent crisis in oil prices came in very bad time and basically initiated by Saudi Arabia. This price war, basically Saudi Arabia is trying to get higher prices, and Russia did not play along. And as I said, it came in the worst time because of coronavirus.
Yeah, it's interesting, Professor. I mean, you talk about the worst timing. You're absolutely correct here. I'm just wondering, right now, to this day, I still don't really understand what Saudi Arabia was thinking. But given where we are now, given where oil is now, given what we know about slowing global demand from the coronavirus, who has to blink first here, Saudi Arabia or Russia? Or can somebody bring them to the table?
Yeah, I believe here there are basically three main players, Saudi Arabia, Russia, and the United States. For Saudi Arabia, the main advantage Saudi Arabia has is very low, probably the lowest price of producing oil. It is extremely cheap in Saudi Arabia to produce oil. This is their main advantage. On the other hand, Russia's main advantage is Russian economy is more diversified than Saudi economy. And in the last few years, Russia has accumulated some money to help it to survive any crisis in oil prices. The third, and probably as Americans, the most important player is United States. U.S. shale gas is paying the price. This collapse of oil prices is kind of mixed blessing for United States. On one side, American oil companies, shale gas, are paying a huge price because they cannot stay in business with these very low oil prices. On the other hand, American consumer should be happy. Low oil prices mean low gas, but also it has not come in the right time because of coronavirus. Many people are not driving, many people are staying home. So these low oil prices are not helping many American consumers.
It's interesting here. It's I think you're right. You outlined correctly and for us and clearly for us kind of the two sides of the coin here. It's interesting. The Saudi Arabia, while they have the lowest cost of production, they also have a very high. They subsidize their economy so much with their oil economy, and I heard they need something near $80 a barrel to balance their budget and fund their programs. So give us a sense of what the pressure might be on the Saudis from that perspective.
Saudi Arabia has about $500,000 in sovereign wealth funds. They depend on this money to help them survive low oil prices, and their policy has always been other producers cannot survive in very low oil prices environment. So their main asset, their main strategy is to depend on this accumulated wealth. It is not clear how long they can depend on this. Saudi Arabia is involved in war in Yemen and is buying a lot of weapons, is competing with Iran. So my guess, this price war between Russia and Saudi Arabia will not last for very long. The two countries need money, need to sell oil at higher prices. To some extent, Russia is happy because Russia is not happy with American sanctions on Russia, and Russia is trying to gain market share at the expense of U.S. shale oil, especially in Europe.
So given that backdrop, just one last question, Professor, what do you think the odds are, the likelihood is that the United States will in fact be able to broker a deal between Russia and Saudi Arabia?
I would say now the United States is overconsumed by coronavirus and the rest of the world, not only United States. But we strongly believe in the market, and some people believe the market will take care of this problem. And I believe Russia and Saudi Arabia will reach a deal even without U.S. help, because the two countries are paying the price.
Godhat Balgat, Professor of National Security at the Near East Southside Center for Strategic Studies. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your perspective on this global oil market. Again, it's taken a little bit of certainly a big backseat to the impacts on the financial markets from the coronavirus. But again, for Saudi Arabia and Russia, major impact to their revenue. It's good news at the pump if you're out there driving and get lower gas prices. Right now, let's go back to the markets. Again, a little bit of a green on the screen. It feels actually a little bit like we have a little bit of stability in the market relative to what we've been experiencing recently. Kriti Gupta from Bloomberg News covers all things markets for us. She joins us here. Kriti, what are you seeing in the marketplace? What's the feel you're seeing in the marketplace?
I was just talking to David about this ahead of you hopping on air, and it kind of feels a little eerie here, right? Because we've seen swings in both directions, and now we're, like he says, seeing some stabilization. It's a little strange to be seeing, but also kind of a good sign potentially. The other way to read it is there is some confusion in markets right now. We just don't know, is this a kind of buying in the dip opportunity? Is there real momentum behind this trade? Or is this just kind of like, there's no real reason to sell. We saw a sell-off yesterday. So it kind of looks like some mixed emotions here.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of what we're seeing across the board. It's interesting what the market, one of the things that the market's been looking for is some, concrete evidence out of Washington that a fiscal rescue or rescues packages are on the way. Is your sense that we're getting some positive news there and that's trickling into the market?
Well, it looks like it. And you know what? The Fed and the kind of government has delivered on the things that the market was asking for. They were really asking for to see some kind of government institutions stepping up to the plate, really coming out with some big moves here. We saw the Fed really kind of take control of the reins, coming out with that 150 basis point emergency cut, bringing rates to zero. You saw them really targeting kind of the front end of the curve. Now kind of creating these swap lines for kind of that dollar liquidity issues we had. You see the government creating those bipartisan efforts, consistent stimulus. So things are looking good. Here's the problem, though. We still have not quantified the actual impact of this. And it's markets 101. Markets don't like uncertainty. So we don't actually know, will the stimulus even work? And I wish I had the answer for you, but the truth is we still don't know the extent of the virus yet or the demand impact. In a world of algos and quants, there are still a lot of unknowns here.
Yeah, Critty, one of the issues that's been kind of raising its head over the last couple of days has been one of liquidity or lack thereof in certain aspects of the market. Even in the U.S. Treasury market, even out on the long end of the curve, the most liquid of all markets. What are you hearing today?
That's right. It kind of seems like when you're looking at the virus kind of as it's kind of taken over markets, the phases that it's been through, it's coming in kind of phases of where people are parking their cash, right? First, we saw extreme volatility in the equity market. That has continued. Then it kind of switched to your safe havens where your traditional treasuries, golds, Japanese yen. Now it's going over to dollars. And I think the reason for that kind of transition, and I think the folks on MLive will agree with me here, is because the Fed has really come out and make those targeted efforts towards the treasuries market. A big part of that is announcing that commercial paper facility, really targeting the front end of the curve. And that's giving some investors a little bit of security here that they don't need to go in and hoard treasuries. What they do, on the other hand, are interpreting as is that when we need to get into the treasury market, we need the dollars to do that. And that's why you're seeing kind of a funding squeeze on the dollar side, which looks like the Fed is addressing as well now.
Yeah, lastly, Critty, it's interesting. Some people I've talked to have said, gee, we just need a big pop back up. Some are saying, no, a couple of days of just steady type of stability in the marketplace is really what this market needs. What are you hearing out there when you talk to traders?
I think the latter. Volatility has been a major issue right now, and that's when you're seeing kind of headlines of 12% sell-off, bigger since 1987. Those are scary headlines, and that's definitely playing into sentiment here. So if we can actually hold these gains that we're seeing right now, the S&P up 1.2% on the day, that would be a good sign. That means that, okay, things are kind of calming down. There's a little bit of stability, but once again, we need the VIX to come down. We need a few days of this, not just one.
Very good. Critty Gupta, thanks so much for joining us. We always appreciate your market commentary as we look at markets. Again, a little bit as Critty and I were just discussing, some stability here. Kind of have the S&P and Dow up 1%, NASDAQ up more. The tech companies really leading the way up 3%. Oil up 22% there on WTI crude after that historic sell-off yesterday. Right now, let's get a business flash with Doug Krisner. Doug, what do you have for us?
Hey, Paul, I want to begin with the VIX. You guys were talking about the issue of volatility. Right now, we're at a level 74, down today only by 3%. Dow Industrial Average right now is ahead by 1.2%. Paul, you were talking about energy. That group is leading the recovery of the broader market with the S&P 500 up by 0.9%. The S&P 500 energy group better by nearly 5.5%, given this recovery that we're seeing in WTI crude after that 24% drop yesterday. Active crude right now is at 24.85 with a gain of more than 22%. NASDAQ Composite better by about 3% right now. A lot of the big cap tech names like Tesla, Netflix, and Facebook pushing higher. In terms of long-term interest rates, 10-year Treasury right now down in yield by about 12 basis points, 1.06%. Some bleak economic news. Not surprisingly, first-time jobless claims jumping last week. We're at a level of 281,000 now. And a regional manufacturing index from the Philly Fed suffering its largest bump ever for the month of March. Right now, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up by 1.2%. We've got a much weaker yen here, 110.24, and a weaker euro at $1.678. I'm Doug Krisner. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash.
Doug Krisner, thank you so much. We are awaiting comments from New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio. We will bring them to you live in just moments. But first, let's take a look at the healthcare aspect of the coronavirus. How is the healthcare industry tackling this issue? We are pleased to welcome Stephen Seedhouse. Stephen's a director of equity research and a biotech analyst at Raymond James. He joins us on the phone. Stephen, thanks so much for joining us. You know, we're starting to hear some more. We heard some of the presidential press conference today on the coronavirus about some of the drugs that may become available. What can you tell us about what we might be able to expect from big pharma and the biotech companies?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me on. I think right now we can all agree that there's an urgent need for effective treatments. And fortunately, as you alluded to, the industry's already begun repurposing some older antiviral drugs to test against this new virus and accelerated discovery efforts of new therapies, really. And one of the points that we've been trying to make in our research notes the past few weeks is really that we should be focused on evidence-based medicine and considering all promising potentially effective therapies and not just those. One of the drugs being tested now in the U.S. at scale is going to be chloroquine or hydroxychloroquine, in addition to another drug called remdesivir, which is developed by Gilead, a company that we cover, which has been getting more press. And the point here is that there'll be well-controlled studies. There'll be hopefully enrolling lots of patients and gathering good data and getting a definitive answer in the coming weeks whether or not these drugs are truly effective. I will say that there's some early emerging data from, in particular, France as it relates to chloroquine, and some anecdotal reports both in the U.S. and elsewhere for Gilead's remdesivir that they could be working. But again, that's not definitive and proven, and we'll find out hopefully as these studies that are ongoing now percolate whether or not we have at least at a minimum a holdover therapy that can get us through this crisis that we're clearly in.
So, Stephen, as you well know from your work covering the biotechs, the timing here can be much, much, much longer than people usually anticipate here. And I'm still kind of uncertain here whether we're talking about, a couple of months to get something into the market or perhaps much, much longer. And given that these are existing therapies that maybe just be repurposed, can you give us a sense of how you think it's going to play out?
Yeah, sure. So the two that I'm focused on really, remdesivir and chloroquine, is because that was what the task force mentioned this morning. And it's also what we've, sort of concluded over the last week or two from our diligence could be the most promising. And for remdesivir, in the case of Gilead's drug remdesivir, that's in clinical studies right now. It's not yet approved for any other indication, so it's a developmental agent. And the expectation is that data from those studies will be available in April. If positive, the hope would be that the FDA could accelerate a review process and look to approve that drug in the subsequent months. So looking at a sort of early summer timeframe. Now, that said, the drug could still be made available prior to its formal approval by the FDA, and in fact is being made available through a program called compassionate use. So you can get remdesivir if you're a hospitalized, severely ill patient on the basis of compassionate use. Your doctor has to essentially apply to put you on the drug, and the FDA will approve its compassionate use and gather the data from that use case. For chloroquine, it's a little different situation. It may actually be more accelerated than that because this drug is approved. It's been approved for 70 years to treat and prevent malaria. It's also approved for a serious form of arthritis. So that drug we know has a use history in the United States as an approved agent. It's, of course, not yet approved for COVID-19. But the hope there, again, and for example, Bayer just donated 3 million pills of this drug to the U.S. government, and Sanofi is doing similar in France right now. That's going to be made widely available on a test basis right now, basically, in the U.S., and we can accrue data, and because it's already approved, prescriptions can be written off-label for that if it turns out to be effective, essentially immediately.
Interesting. Stephen, so did we learn anything from China? Did China have any knowledge to share with the rest of the world as it relates to treatment?
Well, it's a great question. The answer is yes, and some of the rationale for testing these drugs, remdesivir and chloroquine, in the United States comes from anecdotes and reports coming out of China. And the reason why we're not, for example, highlighting in this morning's press conference a drug called lopinavir or ritonavir is because a study study that was conducted in China during the original outbreak in Wuhan turned out to show that drug was ineffective. That was published last night in the New England Journal. So, yeah, the data that are emerging from China are helping us to figure out what may or may not be effective. But again, they're not necessarily. To be clear, there's no large-scale successful study that's been completed to show any of these are effective. There are breadcrumbs that we're following here in the United States and in Europe to try and test the right drugs, and hopefully those definitive tests will give us, optimistic answers.
So, Steve, let's assume, one of these two drugs or maybe another one that we aren't aware of right now does prove to be effective. Does the industry have the capability to get them to market in scale relatively quickly? I'm just not sure the manufacturing process and the timeframes.
Yeah, another great question. Hopefully, and I would say it's more likely for chloroquine because of the type of drug it is. It's a pill. As opposed to remdesivir, which is an intravenously injected, infused drug. And so you need to essentially be infused with the drug over a 10-day period or a 5-day period, depending on what turns out to work in the studies. And chloroquine, as I mentioned, some large companies already have essentially stockpiles of this drug that they're willing to provide. And the synthesis seems easy enough. You could scale up if you devoted efforts to it, large-scale, widespread use of chloroquine in particular. Remdesivir a little more difficult. I think that'll be reserved for severe cases and potentially healthcare workers.
So, just lastly, Steve, what are the names? What are the companies in your coverage that are working towards a coronavirus treatment that people should pay attention to?
Well, first and foremost, Gilead is the company developing remdesivir, and that's the one that's gotten the most headlines. We cover Gilead, and we have an outperform rating on the stock, not necessarily because of the coronavirus treatment, although in this market it has outperformed, but it's really an antiviral company. They also develop the majority of the drugs to treat, for example, HIV and also hepatitis C. So Gilead's one. Some of the other companies, I would just note we don't cover them, but another company that is trying to develop an antibody approach that could be ready in a few months is Regeneron. And there are a whole host of companies that have initiated discovery efforts, and there's too many to name, really trying to develop a new drug that by the time we get to next season could be ready. So lots of work going on.
Steve Seedhouse, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Steve's a biotech analyst for Raymond James, giving us his thoughts on some of the treatments that are in the works as we speak. We had the coronavirus task force this morning, kind of going over them in some detail, which was helpful. And so Steve called out a couple of those that potentially could be available, I guess probably talking about months here as opposed to weeks, but certainly the industry is working hard on that. So Steve was very helpful helping us parse that out. Just looking at the markets here, continue to hold the gains here. Again, that tremendous volatility that we've experienced in the market still with us with the VIX. As Doug Krisner's been reporting this afternoon, the VIX, it's still at very high, 73.6. So volatility still the name of the game in the market. But the S&P up about 1% here. Dow up a little bit better, 1.15%. But the real action in the equity markets is in the technology stocks. NASDAQ up 3.2%. That's 225 points, putting the NASDAQ at 72.16. The Dow Jones Industrials, that's a number that people like to focus on. Absolute level here, 20,150. And it wasn't too long ago that we were pushing up against 30,000 on the Dow. So tremendous pullback in the market. Getting a look at the treasuries, the 10 years up 120, 30 seconds, pushing that yield down to 1.02%. The 2 years at 0.34%. So a little bit of a steepening of that yield curve. WTI crude, another big move, 22% to the upside, $24.87 a barrel on crude. Volatility, we're here for you. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S. stocks are posting gains as bargain hunters eye tech companies. The Dow is up 206 points, S&P up 18, the Nasdaq climbing 194 points. Tesla, Twitter, and Netflix are each up 6%. Well, one of the downsides of the pandemic are the disruptions of industries, businesses, and jobs. Applications for jobless benefits hit a 2-year high last week of 281,000. And Pantheon Economics predicts the number of jobless claims by next week could reach 2 million. Meanwhile, while dining out is on the coronavirus list of no-nos, the restaurant industry is in a crisis. Industry-wide, restaurants are losing their customer base, creating a real threat for an industry that was already slowing down. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived in Philadelphia. Local time is 3:05 p.m. and the temperature is 67 degrees. At this time, you are now free to use your cellular devices.
You know that feeling when you get to turn your phone on after the plane lands? You can have that feeling every time you drive. Make sure your cell phone is stowed away whenever you are behind the wheel.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
What if you could keep the top economic experts in a conference room next to your office without having to feed them?
Do we need better optics? Do we need some substance? Do CEOs care about ESG?
We have seen quite a lot of stimulus pumped into the system already.
It's the biggest warning yet about the financial risks of climate change.
Now there are more ways to hear us. Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and at BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
You love TuneIn for live-breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
They're a little bit of a lot of things, but they're all pure love. Adopt pure love at theshelterpetproject.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council, the Humane Society of the United States, and Maddie's Fund.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing, LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
If you love them enough to listen to them practice the same song on tuba,
please be done.
Over and over and over and over and over, then surely you'll check NHTSA.gov/the right seat to make sure they're correctly buckled in the back seat.
Sounds good, honey.
Check today at NHTSA.gov/the right seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
How should investors be positioning?
We go there.
Let's talk about export numbers because they've been quite shocking. Korea, we saw Singapore, Japan too.
Tonight at 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Bing. Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Balance of Power with David Weston.
Good morning, good afternoon. Paul Sweeney here, sitting in for David Westing. We have some green on the screen. Coming up, we're going to take a look at the funding markets. Is there a liquidity problem in the funding markets, in the treasury markets? We'll get the latest. But first, let's get a Bloomberg Business Flash from Doug Krisner. Doug, what do you have?
Hey, Paul, right now we are higher, but barely. If you look at the Dow and the S&P 500, well off the best level of the session here with the industrials up 0.7%. S&P 500 better by about 0.6%. Can't ignore the recovery that we're seeing today in WTI crude oil after that 24% drop yesterday. Active crude in New York better by more than 22%. We're trading $24.95, and that's giving a lift to many of the big energy names. And the S&P 500 energy index overall is up nearly 3.9%. Also seeing relative strength in consumer discretionary, communication, and information tech stocks, and the latter helping to send the NASDAQ composite to a gain of just about 2.7%. We do have Ford suspending a dividend. Automakers trying to reserve a lot of cash. At the same time, the company is saying that it will fully draw down on a $15.4 billion credit line, actually two separate credit lines, and Ford has retracted earnings guidance for 2020. Right now we have Ford shares trading, F is the ticker, let me just get it for you here, trading down about 3.5%. Right now in the bond market, U.S. 10-year Treasury 1.02% in yield, so we're down about 17 basis points. Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index pushing up by more than 1%. Have a much weaker yen here, 110.18, and a weaker euro as well as at $1.07.03. I'm Doug Krisner. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash.
Doug, thanks so much. We appreciate that. Well, there's been some growing concern here as the market melts down about liquidity in certain aspects of the fixed income market. Maybe liquidity is not nearly where it needs to be, and what's driving that. To get some answers, we welcome our good friend Alex Harris. He covers all things fixed income markets for Bloomberg News. Alex, thanks so much for joining us. Just give us the lay of the land of how you think this market from a liquidity standpoint is stacking up over the last several days.
Hi, Paul. Well, I think it all depends on what you're looking at in terms of liquidity because, it's very much a bifurcated market. We were wholesale seeing funding strains across both secured and unsecured funding. So on the secured side, we're talking about, your repo, your overnight lending collateralized by treasuries. And then, on the unsecured side, we're talking about commercial paper market, which is why the Fed has rolled out sort of their alphabet soup of programs over the last 3 days to try and get things unfrozen on that side and to get it moving again. But, even with the announcement of these programs, I think some programs will be more effective than others. I also think it's going to come down to timing in terms of, how quickly can the Federal Reserve System get these up and running to make them more effective. Because the other thing is I'm looking at is the spread for non-financial paper, sort of the riskier side, relative to overnight, relative to a risk-free rate, like that spread's widened out to a record. So there are still stresses here, and we're still looking at them. And again, from here, it's just a matter of how quickly can the Fed get this stuff moving.
So, Alex, I know one of the things that got a lot of press over the last day or so is the Fed and the commercial paper market. What did the Fed do here to try to loosen up the commercial paper market?
So they've done a few things. So the problem in the commercial paper market is actually it's a two-sided issue, and it all has to do with this difficulty in selling into this market right now. So overall, dealer balance sheets are still really, really tight due to various regulations that have been enacted post-2008 crisis. So on the one hand, because the dealer balance sheets are so tight, those issuers, those corporations that need to issue commercial paper right now, they can't. because they just don't have anyone. They really don't have any buyers. So that's one problem. And then your other problem is your money market funds that tend to be big buyers of commercial paper are actually trying to sell their commercial paper in the secondary market because they need to raise liquidity. They need to liquidate because they need to anticipate any further outflows coming from their investors. And so they're trying to make sure that they're prepared and they're meeting their regulatory requirements that have been in effect for the past 3 or 4 years. So they all are trying to sell to the primary dealers, and the dealers are like, we don't have room. So essentially what the Fed has done here is, they rolled out one commercial paper funding facility, and that was essentially for the dealers, and that's for the issuers. That's to help the issuers out so they can actually issue to someone indirectly. They announced another facility yesterday, which was the primary dealer credit facility, and people said, this might actually be a bit more effective in wholesale getting these markets moving again because it indirectly will help the money funds. And then they actually came out late yesterday and said, no, we have this other money market facility that we're going to do, which is sort of an amalgamation of sort of two different facilities they rolled out during the 2008-2009 crisis. And now people are like, okay, this is it. This is the one that I think is really going to help because it actually exempts a lot of the banks from leverage and bank capital requirements. So it actually makes it more friendly for the banks to want to use this. And so they're hoping this is really what's going to get that liquidity moving in the commercial paper markets again.
Yeah, that's kind of what we've been hearing from, a lot of the bank executives really over the years that the new restrictions post-crisis could in fact create a liquidity crunch, and perhaps that's kind of what we're seeing here. Is there any talk, do you think, as we look back on this, of any talk to maybe loosen up some of those capital restrictions on the banks so perhaps they could be a better buyer in times of crisis?
I think, I was saying this with someone actually earlier, when the dust settles on this, because I think we still have a ways to go, just given the illiquidity and the issues across many markets, not just even the short end. I think people are going to say, we really need an autopsy. We really need the postmortem on regulations, and understanding, okay, what needs to be tweaked, because it's not just, what you're hearing from everyone is the banks are capitalized. That's not the issue here. It's a markets issue. And so if you're going to continue to rely on banks, rely on primary dealers to be your prime transmission mechanism, then you're going to need to adjust the regulations to figure out, okay, how do we keep everything moving smoothly in times of stress like this, and keep everyone safe. So there are going to be needs, to re-examine this and really do some soul searching on it. And frankly, I think I heard Randy Krasner, former Fed governor, speak on this maybe 5 years ago at this point, who was saying, we're 5 years post Dodd-Frank. Like, we really need to be taking a look at these rules. We really need to be examining how they're all functioning together. And everyone kind of shrugged their shoulders. And now I think people are sort of sobered on this idea that you actually do need to be looking at these regulations and really truly understanding how they all work together and what you want out of them and how you can tweak it to make the system work for everybody.
So, Alex, are you looking for anything else from the Fed here? Is there something that they're not doing that maybe they should be?
At this point, I'm just looking, at least from a funding perspective, to just try and get some of these programs up and running. We're still waiting for more details on a lot of these things. So it remains to be seen. I'll be very curious to see the Investment Company Institute. Their money market flows data will be released this afternoon. So it'll be curious. I'll be interested in watching that for the next, today and then for the next week or so to see if at least until these programs are up and running from the Fed, that at least slows the pace of outflows. That at least clients are all right. There's a resolution. There's something coming here. So that's essentially what I'm going to be looking for. Before the Fed starts implementing more. They're already doing a massive amount of asset purchases on the Treasury side, on the MBS side.
Right.
They have these programs in place. So now we just kind of got to see how everything is going to continue to work together. And we've seen an abatement of the stresses we've been seeing.
Alex, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate you coming on. Nobody understands and can explain clearly the short end of the market like you can. Alex Harris, Bloomberg Funding Markets reporter, joining us to give us some thoughts about liquidity in the marketplace, which is a term that we heard a lot about during the financial crisis, or lack thereof liquidity. So we learned the hard lesson to maintain liquidity in the marketplace. So coming up, the economy. Are we going to get a V-shaped recovery, a U-shape, an L-shape? We will talk to Elena Shuletieva.
Rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Vatsal Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials, so taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Like what you're listening to? Want to make getting back to it easier? Use the favorite button to keep track of the stations and podcasts you love on TuneIn. Just tap or click the heart icon to add it to your favorites. Then find all your go-to audio under the Favorites tab. Pretty easy, right?
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Leave it to the New York Times to make the most intelligent pop music podcast out there.
Welcome to the New York Times Popcast.
On the Popcast, the Times music staff gets together for a weekly roundtable on the hottest topics in popular music. From award show autopsies and reactions to new releases to difficult-to-process scandals and emerging themes in the music landscape, hear distinguished music critics share their perspectives on the latest music news, songs, albums, and artists of note on the New York Times Popcast. Search and favorite Popcast to join the conversation.
My education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
To protect her home and family in a disaster, Karen was willing to wade through water, mud, and insurance paperwork.
Yeah, I can do this.
You go, Karen! By simply understanding and updating what her insurance covers and doesn't cover now, she'll be better prepared no matter when disaster strikes. Learn other simple ways to protect your home and family before a natural disaster at ready.gov. That's ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, we're at 47 past the hour. Let's get you caught up on market action today. Equities trading at higher levels, although, to be fair, we are off the best level of the day. Consumer discretionary names helping to lead the S&P to a gain of more than 1.3% right now. We're at 2,430. Also, a lot of strength in the energy group as crude oil recovers from that humongous drop yesterday. We were down 24% at New York trading yesterday. Right now, the gain is nearly 24%. WTI trading 25.20. Dow Industrial Average is up 1.4%, and strength in Infotech sending the NASDAQ Composite higher by about 3.4% today. Many of the information tech stocks are trading up. Apple shares right now better by 1%, although the standout performer, clearly Facebook, stock is up more than 7.5% right now. And shares in Netflix also being actively traded today. Netflix shares right now better by more than 8%. Over in the bond market, U.S. 10-year Treasury rising. Actually, we're down in yield by nearly 13 basis points, 1.06%. We've got more move to the strong side for the dollar, with the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up 1.2%. Much weaker yen here, 110.31, and the euro is down more than 2% against the greenback at $1.690. You're caught up on markets. Let's get back to Balance of Power.
Thank you so much, Doug Krisner. From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Paul Sweeney, sitting in for David Weston. One of the things I think economists and investors are trying to do is pencil in as best they can some scenarios for the remainder of 2020 in terms of economic growth. Is it a V-shaped recovery? Is it a U-shaped recovery, or an L, or maybe even something worse that we haven't thought of yet? Yelena Shulyetyeva, Bloomberg's senior U.S. economist, joins us with her thoughts. Yelena, just set the table for us here. What is Bloomberg Economics forecasting right now for the remainder of 2020?
Right. We are in the middle of revising the forecast. We will publish the forecast tomorrow morning, but it obviously looks like it's going to be a decline for the year in economic growth, with most of the impact of the negative impact concentrated in the second quarter of this year. And even if the virus and virus-related quarantines and closures of businesses ends in the second quarter of the year, we will not see V-shaped recovery or U-shaped recovery, as you were mentioning. We are thinking more like a hockey stick sort of profile. So we think that the recovery in the second quarter will not be as quick. So I think the key part of it is how fast the labor market can recuperate. And I think we will not see much strength even in the third quarter of the year. So just to put it in perspective for you, this morning we received jobless claims data, and that was a sharp decline of 70,000, but it's just a tip of an iceberg here of what is going to come in the coming weeks.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that's where a lot of people are saying, geez, the unemployment is kind of the first thing we're starting to see as we hear stories about layoffs. Let's talk about the consumer here, because what has been driving the U.S. economy has been the consumer. You've been, kind of writing about that a lot over the last several years. And a big part of the consumer has been the strong job market here. How are you thinking about how the consumer might fare coming out on the other side of this?
So, again, we're already starting to see job losses. So jobless claims are going to spike, and the only thing that will limit the extent of an increase in jobless claims is basically how the states will be able to handle all the filings. So that means that employment rate will probably rise. We might see doubling in the unemployment rate by the end of the second quarter of this year. And that will obviously mean a lot of lost income. So it will be a shock to personal income growth, which will result in declines in durable goods spending and services. So we think that the non-durable spending will hold a little bit better because we will continue to spend on essentials, whether it's through Amazon or buying food supplies. In fact, in the first quarter, we think that growth will remain positive, and retail sales for the month of March will be quite okay because we are stockpiling. But in the second quarter, we'll see a sharp decline in auto sales, in unnecessary services, things like leisure, hospitality, travel, all recreational activities, and so on.
So, Yelena, we've had, it seems like a much more concerted effort coming out of Washington in terms of fiscal stimulus. Based upon what we know so far, do you think these are good first steps? How much more do you think is needed? What are you guys factoring into your models?
We absolutely need much more. We need a quick and a blunt increase in fiscal help. I think, the price tag on that $1.2 trillion package that the administration is seeking is getting bigger and bigger every day. So the further we delay the approval of it, the bigger the price tag will become. So if it's checks sent out to people within the next couple of weeks, that could be meaningful, I think, and it's very much comparable to growth in nominal GDP for the year as a whole. So, for example, GDP grew something like $800 billion in 2019. The $1.2 trillion package exceeds that amount. So it could be a meaningful thing, but it just needs to be done quickly. Otherwise, it just won't matter.
Is there anything the Fed can do? It was arguably preemptively moving, or certainly moving ahead of the administration and of Congress. Is there anything left in the Fed's toolbox that could have any kind of meaningful effect?
I think the Fed still has a lot of ammunition. They can increase the size of quantitative easing. What they are doing right now, they are coming up with yet another program every day to ensure the smooth functioning in the financial markets. They are helping particular financial institutions. They are helping a broader array of non-financial companies through commercial paper facility, for example. So they will continue to help financial markets using the tools that they actually used during the financial crisis of 2008. And as I already said, they can still increase the amount of QE. So all this will be helpful, but the big elephant in the room, once again, is fiscal policy. And without implementation of a big fiscal package soon, we will be talking about a prolonged recession here.
Elena, thank you so much for joining us here. You've been a star here, appearing and helping us really get a handle on the economic impact going forward. Elena Shiletieva, Bloomberg's senior U.S. economist, joining us on the phone. We have continued strength in the markets. We have a little bit of a move up in the equity markets here. We have the S&P up 2.4%, the Dow up 2.45%, and the NASDAQ up 4.2%. So a little bit of a pickup just in the last half hour. Crude up 24%, WTI crude. So continuing to move there. And that 10-year Treasury up 1 and 11/32, pushing that 10-year yield down to 1.048%. Looking at the dollar, boy, what a day it continues to be for the DXY index. We're now trading at 102.66. That's up 1.5%. So just extraordinary. The VIX coming in a little bit down to 70. That's down 6 points. Coming up, Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly. I'm Paul Sweeney. This is Bloomberg.
People aren't aware that TuneIn lets you listen to the same terrestrial stations that you pick up on your FM AM dial, except you can hear them from anywhere. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
On this week's On the Media, the president thought he could defeat the narrative of COVID-19 with his usual tactic of, quote, censorship through noise. But the virus is proving resistant.
People's lives are going to be disrupted on a daily basis, and as that happens, the alternate reality he's created is inevitably going to implode.
Catch On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast from WNYC Studios on TuneIn today.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Main forces driving work on climate change, carbon emissions and air pollution in China did fall dramatically in February. That silver lining, though, turned out to be temporary. That's the Bloomberg Green Business Report. I'm Bob Moon.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing to meet the needs of their most complex clients. Karen Novak, Chief Operating Officer at Pershing Advisor Solutions, explains how.
At BNY Mellon's Pershing, we bring customized insights and strategies to help you grow your advisory business and stay on the leading edge. We can support the needs of your most sophisticated clients with a full range of investment and wealth management solutions, from access to private banking to consolidated bank and brokerage custody. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength and high-touch service that BNY Mellon's Pershing can provide. Are you well positioned to stand out from your competition?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Brokerage custody provided by Pershing LLC and other services provided by Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC. Both members of FINRA and SIPC. Private banking and bank custody provided by BNY Mellon NA. Member FDIC.
Our relationship with Asia is simple. Find the most experienced journalists.
These countries will need each other more and more in the future.
Let them gather the best data and experts.
Let's get to Singapore now and our guest.
Then bring everything they find straight to you.
Let's talk about where you are. There's quite a lot of headwinds there too.
Actually, it's not simple. It's just better. Bloomberg Daybreak Asia, tonight at 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus, global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
Welcome to Bloomberg Business Week. It is Thursday, March 19th, 2020, live from my home in New Jersey and from his home in New York, Jason Kelly. I'm Carol Masser. Our theme on this Thursday, Jason, it does seem like financial markets catching their breath just a little bit as more details are coming on potential plans to help both financially to help out the impact from that virus and health plans and health moves and initiatives to directly stop the virus.
That's exactly right. We're talking about physical and fiscal, I think, to a large extent here, Carol. And listen, it's a day where only a move of 2-something%, which used to be a big deal, feels like, oh, okay. Let's, as you say, pause and catch our breath. Let's catch our breath for a second with Doug Krisner. He's got an update on where that trade has gone and where it may be headed. What's up?
Well, I'm looking at the S&P 500 rising by 1.8%. Consumer discretionary out in front of this advance. Also want to highlight energy stocks, which are moving to the upside, given a recovery that we're seeing now in crude oil. WTI in the New York session recovering nearly all of that big drop yesterday. We were down 24% in New York trading in the last session. Right now, better by about 24%. We're at 25.17 in the active contract. Dow Industrial Average better by 1.6%. You guys were talking about this massive monetary and fiscal stimulus that will be unleashed. The Fed today establishing temporary dollar liquidity swap lines with 9 other central banks. This will allow foreign central banks to meet the needs of companies and financial institutions rushing to get a hold of dollars. You know, the global payment system really is under severe strain right now. And look at the price action in the dollar. If you look at the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index, we're up by nearly 1.4%. So the dollar gaining traction against the majors. Flip side of that has a weaker yen, 110.38, and a much weaker euro at $1.0675. We're seeing a recovery in many of the big cap tech names like Tesla, Netflix, Facebook. Facebook shares alone are up more than 7%. That's helping to lead the NASDAQ composite higher by about 3.5% right now. We had some weak eco data, not surprising. First-time jobless claims up at a level of 281,000. And then if you look at that regional manufacturing survey from the Philly Fed, the biggest slump that we have seen for the month of March. 10-year Treasury yielding 1.04%. So we're coming in by nearly 15 basis points in yield. You're caught up on markets. Let's get back to Jason and Carol.
All right, Doug, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. And Carol, as we have tried to do every day, we've got a team of experts to break this down. One of the top doctors looking at this, Amy Compton-Phillips, back with us. She'll join us in just a few minutes from Washington, the Pacific Northwest, where we know a lot of lessons have been learned.
Yeah, absolutely. We're also going to get insight into the AIDS researcher chasing to find a coronavirus treatment. It is the cover of the magazine this week. It is a must-read for everyone to kind of understand the race to find a cure. We've got really a great group of experts because we know everything's being impacted by the virus. So we're going to check in with academia, business schools specifically. We're going to talk about more businesses, how they are running because of the virus and some of the struggles that they're dealing with. Of course, markets, leisure. We've got the dean from one of the top business schools. We're talking about the Columbia Business School. And we've also got the CEO of Land's End.
And we're going to talk to the top executive at CVS who is dealing with this crisis on the front lines. And then to wrap up the show, a friend of the show, guy who we've had on before, and I know you've binge-watched his program, John Tapper, the host of John Taffer, excuse me. He is the host of Bar Rescue.
All right. First up, though, let's set the Business Week agenda. And we do have with us Ritika Gupta. She's markets reporter at Bloomberg News. She's back in our Interactive Brokers studio. Also with us is Dave Wilson, stocks editor at Bloomberg News, again, in our Interactive Brokers studio. We have a small staff there, and you guys are troopers to be there. Dave, I do want to start with you. Jason was pointing out on our prep call for the broadcast, you know, we are so used to these very substantial, significant moves, several percentage points. Today, it feels like, wow, nothing's happening.
Well, that's if you're looking at the indexes. Let me tell you, if you're looking at individual stocks, it is a whole different story. Let me tell you how extreme it's become. Almost a tenth of the S&P 500, almost a tenth, is higher by at least 10% in today's trading. If you look at the other side of the ledger, there are only 3 stocks that are down more than 10%. American Airlines, Harley-Davidson, and a lithium producer, Albemarle. That's how things are going. So, and you see it even more in the smaller companies than you do in the larger ones at this point. The Russell 2000 index is up 5%. I mean, it just goes to show you, people are willing today to take the kind of risk that they wouldn't have been just yesterday or certainly not a few weeks ago.
So, Ritika, come on in here, because one of the stories that we've been following very closely is oil, and a huge jump today, right?
You're right. It's just a massive rebound, up, 23% in one day. But we are still just, of course, at $25 a barrel. Obviously, we got this news of Trump weighing in on the price war, giving it some support. S&P 500 Energy Index, the best performing sector today, but yesterday closed down more than 14%. And some strategists now saying it could go below $20, Citi saying $17, and some traders even pointing to prices falling deep enough that some physical players will start actually buying oil to store it. That's known as the contango trade. Now, sticking with oil, but actually looking more at the credit side. So, of course, we've seen those spreads blow out in high yield, and energy being a large weighting with them. But we're also seeing it a lot in the investment grade side too. For instance, companies like Marathon Oil, their 2025 debt trading at just 75 cents on the dollar. That's a sign that their credit rating really at risk here.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're watching that, right, in terms of how vulnerable from a debt picture some of those energy names are. Dave, I want to bring you back in, because I feel like Jason and I had so many conversations yesterday, some with, and even I think over the week, in terms of the extent of some optimists saying, slow down. At some point, you're going to have investors start to look at, different names that were so expensive just a month ago that are now saying this is a deal, and that when we get on the other side of this virus, and that this might be an entry point. And I feel like we're starting to see some of that.
Oh, absolutely. It's consistent with the kind of gains that I'm talking about. HCA Healthcare, you talk about a company that's going to be under stress potentially in the next few weeks as the coronavirus spreads. They're the biggest U.S. publicly traded owner of hospitals, and the shares are up 25%. Now, granted, I mean, they've taken a beating along with a whole lot of other shares over the past several weeks. There's no question about that. HCA peaked back on February 5th, and if you look through yesterday, the shares were down 55%. So, I mean, there's still a long ways to go to make back that kind of a loss. But at the very least, you're seeing, stocks like HCA show some strength here. So, people are willing to step in and buy where they wouldn't have been, like I say, just a day ago.
All right. Ritika, final word to you. Anything else that you're especially keeping an eye on here as you're looking across all these different markets?
Well, of course, we're all keeping an eye on the dollar, which has been at a record high in that dash for cash and liquidity. But earlier, it was up against all its G10 peers. But we are actually seeing it coming off session highs, perhaps on that Fed announcement of expanding those swap line facilities to those 9 extra central banks. And I mean, if I walk you through some of the other FX moves today, greenback up against now 6 of its peers. And leading the gains, we're seeing some of those commodity currencies, the Aussie dollar, New Zealand dollar, as oil rebounds. The Norwegian krona now also up after those threats of central bank intervention as well. And the pound, I've also been keeping an eye on. Right. That's kind of fluctuated between gains and losses, but we are still at the 116 handle after the BOE cut interest rates to 0.1% and announced bond purchases. Of course, the pound have actually dived to its weakest since 1985 against the dollar in that dash for cash, surpassing Brexit vote lows even.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much. Ritika Gupta is markets reporter for Bloomberg. Dave Wilson, stocks editor. He'll be back with us later on with his chart and stock of the day. Coming up with us, Carol Master, we are going to check in with Amy Compton-Phillips out in the state of Washington. She's been following this so closely.
All right, let's get a check on your world and national news headlines. For that, to Bob Moon in our 1130 newsroom. Hi, Bob.
Carol, Jason, President Trump has turned his attention to making drug treatments available to coronavirus patients, and he offered a status report at the daily coronavirus briefing. Bloomberg's Irv Chapman reports from Washington.
The Food and Drug Administration is tracking it's okay to prescribe drugs previously approved to treat conditions from malaria to arthritis to other respiratory viruses, the president said.
We will know which medicines are safe and which medicines are working the best. We have a couple that we're in really good shape on, and that's for immediate delivery. Immediate, as fast as we can get it.
The FDA will monitor the patients who receive these drugs to see if they're safe and effective and the dosage works. In Washington, Irv Chapman, Bloomberg Radio.
Also at that briefing, in response to a question, the president said the government should take an equity stake in companies that need bailouts. He also said he supports restrictions on bonuses. Democratic Representative Ben McAdams has tested positive for coronavirus and is now under self-quarantine in his Salt Lake City home. He told NBC's Today that he feels terrible.
I'm feeling pretty bad. I think this is probably the worst cold I've ever had, but we're getting by.
2 members of Congress have now tested positive for coronavirus, and the news has sent other lawmakers into self-quarantine as a precautionary measure and raises questions over the potential public health risks of the House and Senate continuing to convene in Washington, even as both chambers rush to enact relief measures as the coronavirus crisis spreads throughout the United States. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Bob Moon.
Tom Keene and Jonathan Tarrow enjoy each other's company.
Most of us don't speak Mandarin. John, do you speak Mandarin?
I do not speak Mandarin.
I just wanted to check that.
Almost as much as they enjoy grilling economic experts.
When this is over, do you bounce back or is there a lasting weakness to it?
Which means that you will enjoy listening.
If things get worse, we're ready to do more.
Bloomberg Surveillance, weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
The market's in focus every business day. The P&L Podcast. Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz.
Are there some sectors that you want to have more or less exposure to?
What's behind this engine of gains?
Analysis of the day's Wall Street action.
The U.S. market looks relatively safe.
From Bloomberg Intelligence, Bloomberg Opinion, and influential newsmakers.
Ward McCarthy joins us right now.
P&L with Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz. Listen today on Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
On this week's On the Media, the president thought he could defeat the narrative of COVID-19 with his usual tactic of, quote, censorship through noise. But the virus is proving resistant.
People's lives are going to be disrupted on a daily basis, and as that happens, the alternate reality he's created is inevitably going to implode.
Catch On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast from WNYC studios on TuneIn today.
A lot of people aren't aware that TuneIn lets you listen to the same terrestrial stations that you pick up on your FM AM dial, except you can hear them from anywhere. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
You're fierce. You take care of business and don't hold back. Taking care of your health shouldn't be any different. You know when something's off. Don't ignore symptoms like fatigue, joint pain, and rashes. Listen to your body. It could be lupus. We're here to help you take control. Learn how at BeFierceTakeControl.org. Brought to you by the Lupus Foundation of America and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
So we're receiving information on a couple of situations, not the least of which from the Fed, a temporary dollar liquidity swap line with nine other central banks. This will allow foreign central banks to meet the need of companies and financial institutions as they rush for dollars. Look at the price action in the greenback against the majors. A much stronger dollar with the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index rising by 1.3%. We've got a weaker yen, 110.48, and the euro down more than 2% right now against the dollar at $1.684. Recovery in equities being led in large part, by higher oil prices boosting energy shares. WTI crude oil right now up 24%. We're trading 25.28, and the S&P 500 energy group helping to send the S&P 500 up by 1.6% right now. So markets are still in the process of digesting this massive monetary and fiscal measures. We had the Bank of England earlier today cutting rates to a record low 0.1%. Dow Industrial Average is up 1.8%. NASDAQ Composite better by just about 3.6% right now. Shares in Ford trading down by 2%. The company has suspended the dividend. Management had repeatedly vowed to maintain this even in spite of an economic downturn, and Ford is also saying that it will fully draw on two separate credit lines worth about $15.4 billion. Additionally, Ford has retracted its 2020 earnings guidance. U.S. 10-year Treasury yielding 1.06%. That's a quick look at markets. Back to Jason and Carol.
All right, Doug Christner, thank you so much. There were many headlines coming out of this morning's coronavirus task force update, a lot of it having to do with healthcare and treatments really aimed at controlling the virus or treating the virus, excuse me. So I do want to make some sense out of it because there were a lot of headlines. Dr. Amy Compton-Phillips is back with us. She's Chief Clinical Officer, Executive VP at Providence St. Joseph Health, on the phone once again from Everett, Washington. Remember, we've talked with her several times over the last few weeks, and her hospital, the system, is where the first U.S. case of the virus was confirmed. Dr. Compton-Phillips, nice to have you back with us. Forgive me as I stumbled at the top, but I was reading through some of the headlines and just trying to remember all the things that we got out of the conference this morning. The president touting a malaria drug as a potential coronavirus treatment. You also heard things about early coronavirus drug trials yielding mixed results. Where are we? You're there on the front line. What's going on? What do you see as potential realistic treatments for this?
Yeah, I think what's really important is for us to have a systematic approach to this, that we can end up playing whack-a-mole if we go after the next bright, shiny object. And so what we've been really doing here on the West Coast, which at the moment, we're neck and neck with New York, not that we want to race to the front of the line for this, but for having the most cases in our system right now, we're treating it's upwards of about 800 people that either have known or suspected coronavirus. And we're trying to do several things. One is we're trying to make sure that we can triage people appropriately and get them to the right location. So that if you happen to have symptoms of the virus, and because the testing's taking so long, we can't definitively say, we do everything we can to take care of you in your home if you are stable enough to be in your home, so we don't overwhelm the healthcare system, right? We're trying to make sure that in the hospital, if you have to go into the hospital, we're putting you with other patients that also have COVID as well, and so that we can minimize use of the PPE. And then if you need acute care, we have several ongoing trials of medications, including the malarial drugs that the president talked about today, including some of the direct antivirals that you heard about in the past few days. So I think by thinking through this systematically rather than, ping, 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 all over the place, that we can actually kind of get a handle on what's going on.
Well, and Dr. Compton-Phillips, it's really interesting insights. And I also wanted to ask you what you're seeing, because one of the headlines that I think has grabbed a lot of people is the population that's being infected. And it feels like the narrative has shifted there as well in terms of many more young people being not just diagnosed, but hospitalized. Are you seeing that? Have you seen that? And what should we be taking from this latest data?
Yeah, that was an interpretation by the news previously that young people don't get infected. In all the articles and conversations that we've had with the physicians in China, with the physicians in Italy, young people do get infected. Mm-hmm. It's just that they tend to recover at a much higher rate. And so that the mortality is higher in patients that are older and people that have underlying health conditions. But young people absolutely get infected, and we're seeing that same thing here. They end up less often in the ICU on a per capita basis, but they do end up seriously ill, and it's one of the reasons why it's really we are doing everything by hook and by crook to make sure that we have enough capacity in ICUs, because we want to save every single person that comes to us with this bad disease, and not have people dying for lack of access to health care.
Is there some medication out there, perhaps existing, a drug that's already in the system already, the FDA has pretty much signed off on, that we can see then maybe another use of?
We have actually tested a couple different drugs that have, in other kinds of viral diseases, have antiviral activity that have not worked, but we're absolutely looking at the array. And in fact, that the malaria drug that the president mentioned, hydroxychloroquine, is one that's been on the market for decades. And so that has shown early promise, particularly in China, which is why we're standing up the study here as well. And then the antiviral drugs, while it hadn't been approved yet, it was being developed for Ebola, but had another use, and that's the one right now that we have a couple different clinical trials going on to see really if this does work.
Dr. Compton-Phillips, only about 40 seconds left here. Got to ask you, since we've talked a lot about it, testing, is it ramping up? How soon will it be, in your estimation, to the point where it's really rolling in an effective way?
testing is still a dramatic bottleneck. And so part of the challenge is that if for every patient that wants to be tested or every person that wants to be tested and doesn't have major symptoms, it means people with significant disease in a hospital somewhere is not getting tested. And so having really clear, when you have a shortage, you have to figure out who gets what first. And we are in a shortage situation. And as we ramp up over the next month, it'll get better. But right now, we really need to use those tests for the people who need them the most.
Listen, we always thank the time that you give us. Dr. Amy Compton-Phillips, thank you. Chief Clinical Officer, Executive Vice President at Providence St. Joseph Health, on the phone from Everett, Washington. And as we've been saying, Jason, they've been dealing with it from day one. So really seeing how it grows and how, what is working in terms of treatment. But you can see still a struggle. All right, you're listening to Bloomberg Business Week on Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Technology shares are leading a modest Wall Street advance. Traders are breathing a bit easier as global policymakers unleash a range of measures to ease the turmoil. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 241, the S&P 500 up 28, the Nasdaq Composite up 231. Oil is posting its biggest gain since 2008 after President Trump said he'd get involved in the price war between Saudi Arabia and Russia at the appropriate time. Crude is up 24% at $25.34 a barrel. With oil a bargain, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin says the U.S. should buy up to $20 billion in oil to fill the Strategic Petroleum Reserve for a decade. He told Fox Business, let's go out and buy. Add Cirque du Soleil to the list of employers slashing payroll due to the pandemic. It cut 95% of its workforce, citing the forced closure of all of its shows worldwide. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
You took the first step and quit smoking, but even former smokers may still be at risk for lung cancer. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know about a new low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early. It takes only 60 seconds and could save your life. You took the first step, now take the next. Visit SaveByTheScan.org for a simple quiz to see if you're eligible and talk to your doctor about screening. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
What if you could keep the top economic experts in a conference room next to your office without having to feed them?
Do we need better optics? Do we need some substance?
Do CEOs care about ESG?
We have seen quite a lot of stimulus pumped into the system already.
It's the biggest warning yet about the financial risks of climate change.
Now there are more ways to hear us. Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and at BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, I'll talk with the author of a fictional story about a global pandemic that right now feels all too real.
All I did was just drew upon the trends. I just extended them. Unfortunately, real life seems to have outraced even some of my imagination.
Lawrence Wright joins me on the New Yorker Radio Hour from WNYC Studios. Listen to this episode on TuneIn today.
Years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
News without analysis is like half a bridge.
Why is the debt to GDP ratio still so important?
Those things, once they're set in place, stay around for years.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Broadcasting live to New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 1061. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Well, Carol, so much of the story obviously is around the reaction by the administration, which clearly has mobilized this week. We're going to check in with one of our top guys, Ryan Teague Beckwith, down in D.C. to get the latest on how the Trump administration is dealing with this.
Yeah, we definitely have a schedule, right? Every hour or every day we're getting that big update, and I think that is certainly helping everyone in terms of the information flow. We'll hear more about that in just a moment. Let's get, though, to your top business stories and a check on the trading day. Here is, once again, Doug Krisner.
So, Carol, the markets really are working to digest this massive monetary and fiscal stimulus that has been targeted as a way of easing some of the turmoil. We've got the Fed establishing temporary dollar liquidity swap lines with 9 other central banks. Earlier, the Bank of England cut its key rate to a record low 0.1%. And we are being told that the Trump administration is revisiting the idea of issuing ultra-long bonds to finance that $1.3 trillion fiscal stimulus plan. We are told the president's advisors are considering, among other options, issuing both 50-year and 25-year bonds. And the president today saying during a press conference he supports the idea of the government taking equity stakes in certain companies. This was an idea that was floated yesterday by White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow. We're seeing a recovery in crude oil, WTI rallying by more than 22% right now. We're trading $24.86. Earlier, President Trump said he would get involved in the oil price standoff between Saudi Arabia and Russia at the appropriate time. And strength and energy helping to send the S&P 500 up 2% right now. Dow up by a similar amount, and the NASDAQ composite on some tech weakness today, better by more than 4%. Big cap tech shares, and I'm talking about names like Tesla, Netflix, and Facebook on a tear. Look at the dollar. It's rallying against the majors with the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up 1.5%. Much weaker yen at 110.69 and the euro at $1.666. You're caught up on markets. Back to Jason and Carol.
Facebook up 8.9%, Jason. Wow. Dave,
yeah,
that's right.
It is amazing. And that was a great point that Dave Wilson made earlier, that maybe the indices seem a little more muted in terms of swing, but some of the individual names are just swinging wildly. We'll talk about that a lot more, I know, when we get to movers and shakers after the close. For now, let's get down to D.C. Ryan Teague Beckwith. I got to say, you are so good on the Twitters, man. Like, I follow you pretty relentlessly, and you're prolific. And amid all of that, you're also keeping an eye on the administration and its reaction. What do we need to know at this point?
Yeah, I think it can best be explained by a change in my policy against swearing on Twitter. I've decided to allow it now during the course of this. Look, it's like December 9th, 1941. We're at the phase now where the federal government is mounting a response that is, involving sort of the whole of government approach. And so that's the good news. The bad news is that that's where we should have been 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So the delay in that centralized approach, the delay in the acknowledgement of the problem, the delay in reaction, which has led to, I think, like a knock-on effect in that these people you see on TV who just still aren't taking it seriously. All of those things, we're going to pay the price for those in the days to come. And ironically, that's when people will, I think, who haven't been following this closely, will start to feel the most panic, but we will actually have a much better handle on things at that point than we did when no one was panicking or when people weren't panicking enough.
I do want to ask you, Ryan, though, in terms of the administration, the president, and the team that are dealing with this on so many different levels, whether it's defense, whether it's health, whether it's financial, I do feel like there is a bit of a rhythm here, but I do feel like we're also, I know things are getting passed, but I still feel like the sense of urgency of getting things done is not quite there yet. Am I wrong?
No, I don't. One of my friends who's Canadian likes to point out that after Pearl Harbor, the Canadian Parliament was actually in session and voted to go to war on behalf of the United States, and actually entered the war. It took a day for Congress to get into session to actually declare war against Japan. We just aren't having that kind of a fast response. I am struck a little bit by how much the paradigm in the world has shifted, but when you talk to people in Washington, you're still hearing it's, the same sort of, well, there's been some pieces online, we shouldn't deficit spend. I think this is an okay time to deficit spend. Most economists would agree that sort of a Keynesian approach here would be merited in this situation. And you're right, the sense of urgency in doing something quickly and coming up with a response was not there. The Senate went into recess. The House bill kind of came over and they were watching on Twitter to see if Trump would okay it. And the House bill is just the first step.
Right.
I mean, this is,
I can't imagine during the financial crisis that the Senate was in recess and or we'll get back to you, General Motors, to see if we can help you.
If you remember correctly, though, they did vote down the first stimulus in real time, as the stock market was open and the stock market did crash. So, but then seeing that they came back. It's interesting that you have GM and Mary Barr saying, we'll help you create, do a kind of a war assembly line of defibrillators and stuff. So I guess in terms of specific programs, do you have any insight in terms of what we might hear, whether it's
getting checks?
For airlines,
what's
checks?
Happen?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that there is definitely bipartisan agreement on sending cash directly to households to help get them through this. I think that the differences is how much and should we means test it. That is to say, should we not send the checks to people who are wealthy? How do we get the checks out? How soon can we do it? And how much? And do we do it on a recurring basis or do we do it just one time and then wait and see and do it again? All of those are big questions that will need to be resolved before something like that could be done. But I think that there's definitely a consensus of the things that need to be done. We're just not seeing that sort of unified drive to do it yet. But I think that we will see that. Like I said, I feel like the government right now is back in the days when you had to use a slow modem, and it was sort of page loading, and you could sort of watch it load line by line on your web browser.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a little like that.
Yeah, we're just waiting for that AOL dial-up sound at this point. All right, Ryan Teague Beckwith, thank you so much. Always good to catch up with you. Highly recommend following him on Twitter, minute to minute, keeping an eye on everything that's going on in the nation's capital and across all of our coronavirus coverage, Carol.
And I think what he said about people not taking it seriously is speaking to what we heard from Dr. Compton Phillips about, everybody can get this, it sounds like, or certainly a younger generation can.
For sure.
Yeah. All right, let's get back to World and National News headlines. Bob Moon, he is at his home in New York. Hey, Bob.
Thank you, Carol. Jason, a coronavirus drug immediately, says President Trump, adding, as fast as we can get it. He says he's told the Food and Drug Administration to see if it can expand the use of an experimental malaria drug to treat coronavirus infections. At today's White House briefing, Trump said the FDA is considering approving experimental and international drugs, including the one used against malaria, that may help fight symptoms of COVID-19.
This has been used in different forms, very powerful drug in different forms, and it's shown very encouraging, very, very encouraging early results.
Trump and the head of the FDA gave apparently conflicting comments, though, about the availability of the drug. The president said it had been approved and could be prescribed to patients. Minutes later, FDA Commissioner Stephen Hahn said use of the drug would be in a clinical trial to find out whether or not it works, and if so, what dose would be safe and effective. New York Mayor Bill de Blasio and Governor Andrew Cuomo are at odds over the mayor saying residents should prepare for shelter-in-place orders. Cuomo has his own advice.
You take a place like New York City, we are at near panic level. So what you say and how you communicate is very important. Should everybody stay home? Of course. Are we imprisoning people? No. Can you stay inside 24 hours a day? No. When you go out to shop or when you go out to take a walk and get exercise, social distancing.
The shelter-in-place rules in effect in San Francisco since Tuesday allow people to leave their homes for essential tasks like picking up groceries or medicine. Global News, 24 hours a day. I'm Bob Moon.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate based on race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800. (669-9777) 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing, LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Melissa from Michigan. I work an extra part-time job serving lunch at my child's school, but I still can't afford to put food on our table.
Daniel from California. Choosing whether to pay the rent or pay to fix the car to get to work doesn't leave us with much at all. Now we can't even pay for meals.
Hunger is a story we can end. End it at feedingamerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Vatsal Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials, so taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
So we have about an hour and 13 minutes to go in today's session, and the equity market is moving higher, clawing back a portion of the losses that we had yesterday, particularly where crude oil is concerned. You might remember yesterday we were down 24%. Right now the active contract is up more than 26%. We're trading 25.80 roughly in the New York session. Earlier, President Trump said he would get involved in the oil price standoff between Saudi Arabia and Russia at the appropriate time, and the relative strength in oil helping energy shares higher. Let's get to FEMA headquarters right now and President Trump.
You're looking well. So are you. Good to see you, the Vice President. Thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Just a couple quick points. We've had a really good week with FEMA, so I want to give them a shout out. FEMA Region 2 is helping us set up testing. The Army Corps is actually visiting us in this building at 4 o'clock today to talk about repurposing facilities for more beds. So thank you for that.
Yep.
We've had conversations with the VA in terms of backup medical support. Two areas. One, just in terms of where we're going to need some help. One is to underscore Governor Kemp's point on flexible block grants.
Okay.
Those will be important to us to allow us to continue to serve our people. And secondly, the Lord helps those that help themselves. I promise you, we're doing everything we can to get PPE. We're acquiring it. We're getting donations, but we still are going to need a big slug out of the strategic stockpile. So for all the above, many, many thanks.
And so, Phil, try what you can, do the best you can to get what you can actually get. And we're also having a lot of things produced that, frankly, nobody's ever seen anything like this before. But do the best you can, and on block grants, we're going to consider that very strongly. Thank you, Phil.
Thanks, Mr. President.
Hello, John Bell.
Mr. Vice President, appreciate the communication, the coordination, all the help. I did want to just put on your radar screen the fact that I think if you look at cases by state on a per capita basis, we're right at the top of the country, 3 or 4. And of course, the healthcare infrastructure is designed to meet the population. And my fear, based on modeling that I've received today, is that as early as 7 days, we can start to exceed our capacity to deliver healthcare. And even after surging, we may only get an additional 3 days. And so I'm asking for help in terms of surging our medical capacity here in Louisiana. We've got some requests in. For example, we have a VA hospital in New Orleans where we've requested to be able to surge patients there. We haven't received the response yet. We've got a request in for a federal medical station through HHS. We're just asking for help. That is the 10-meter target for me right now, because we're going to do everything we can to mitigate and slow the spread. But in the time that we have, we've got to increase our surge capacity. That is my biggest concern, and I just wanted to express that to you and ask for your ongoing help.
What is your second request? John Bell, what's your second request, please? The second request.
Well, the second request beyond surge capacity is looking at National Guard, bringing them under Title 32 for funding purposes.
Right. Okay. We're going to look at that, and I'm going to try and get you immediate approval on the hospital. I know about the hospital request, and so we're going to speak to the VA. We're going to see if we get immediate, at least as a switch, but we'll get that approved for you one way or the other. All right?
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Okay, thanks a lot, John Bell.
Thank
you.
And you are listening to the President of the United States. He is holding a teleconference at FEMA headquarters, speaking with the nation's governors and other emergency management officials. Let's listen in.
Deborah, if you could say a few words, would be great. And then we have another governor teed up, please.
Great. Again, thank all the governors for your leadership, your partnership in confronting the coronavirus. A few updates and a few requests for each one of you. I want you all to make your citizens aware the President signed the Family First Coronavirus Response Act last night. Coronavirus testing is free. Paid sick leave, family leave for caregivers, food assistance to the needy. Get the word out to your citizens to be very helpful. On testing, as we've said many times and worked with many of you through your state labs and certified labs, and of course at the CDC, testing is now available in all 50 states. We want you to be aware that if you have questions about the availability of testing in your state, you obviously can talk to your state health department and healthcare providers. But I want every governor to know that because of the public-private partnership that the President forged with our commercial labs, Roche, Thermo Fisher, and as of last night, Abbott Laboratories are now coming online literally by the hour. And when they are done, we will have some 2,000 labs stood up around the country with the high throughput testing. Your healthcare providers will know where those resources are. Your State Department will know where their resources are. And we just encourage you to bring your team together. Important to note that while now tens of thousands of more tests are being performed literally every day, the bill the President signed last night also included a provision that states and private labs must report all coronavirus testing results to the CDC. Emphasize that to your state health department, your healthcare providers. encourage you maybe to pull them together today before end of business. We're rapidly expanding testing around the country, but as Dr. Birx will reflect in a moment, we want to make sure that we're getting the results of that testing so that we can be informed about that, and of course that the American people can have full visibility on that testing as well. She'll also explain we will see, as testing is ramping up today and tomorrow, we will see an increased number of cases. We want to give context to you and to your citizens about that. On supplies, President Trump has been engaging industry leaders in the supply chain across the country to make sure that personal protective equipment and medical supplies are broadly available. On the subject of masks, I've talked to many of the governors about N95 masks. Again, in the bill the president signed last night, we have literally unlocked tens of millions of N95 masks. What the president asked the Congress to do, and they did, was we extended liability protection to all industrial N95 masks, so those can now be readily sold to your hospitals and healthcare providers. We urge you to communicate that to your healthcare providers, your hospitals today, to let them know that that supply has dramatically increased and they can place orders. We also would reiterate, if you can reach out to your construction companies, they're in possession of lots of N95 industrial masks, and the president is urging all those builders, and literally hundreds around the country have already done this, to donate those masks to their local hospitals and clinics. On the subject of ventilators, we are currently surveying healthcare providers around the country and suppliers, and I'm pleased to report to you that we have already identified tens of thousands of ventilators, including ventilators that can be converted to treat coronavirus patients. Your action item on that in your state should be you should survey your outpatient surgical centers and your ORs to identify the type of respirators that can be converted. Dr. Birx has been working with suppliers. There's a changed vent that has to be attached. We've identified that those are available, but literally tens of thousands of ventilators are now going to be available because of the survey that's currently underway. The other point that we wanted to emphasize is at the direction of CDC and the President's Coronavirus Task Force, we are encouraging hospitals and every American to postpone elective surgery. Please explain to your citizens that this will have a direct impact on hospital capacity. By suspending elective surgeries, it will free up more space in hospitals, including respirators. As Dr. Birx explained to me, that many people that require a respirator is because of a surgery gone wrong. And so this frees up more of our capacity across the board. I know it's not lost on any of the governors here, Mr. President, that by standing up FEMA, you now have essentially created a structure that every governor is very familiar with in dealing with disasters and emergencies. We've activated all emergency support functions and interagency functions here. Pete Gaynor is here for comments and questions. We intend to run all of the federal response and support to states through here at the National Response Coordination Center and through FEMA. This center is fully operational. Governors, I want you to tell your teams that this NRCC will be connected to your states through your regional administrators and your state emergency operations center. This will be very familiar to all of you. Any questions that you have, the only thing that I would ask on the President's behalf, if there are issues that arise in your state, begin with your regional FEMA administrator. Literally 20,000 people work for FEMA. You all know what incredible people they are, and they're ready to go to work your issues. So with that, Mr. President, I might just turn it over to Dr. Birx with your permission, and she'll reflect on what we know about the data and what we know about the spread of the disease. But thank you for your bold leadership. Thanks for what you all are doing to implement the President's coronavirus guidelines. It's an honor to be serving with all of you.
Thank you, Mike. Deborah?
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Vice President.
All right, you've been listening to a briefing held at FEMA headquarters led by the President and the Vice President. We will continue to monitor the headlines coming out of there. The Vice President and the President speaking to the nation's governors, Carol, and as you heard the Vice President say just then, standing up FEMA, which, as he said, is a familiar organization to many governors around the country.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just a reminder of how cities and states are really grappling with the coronavirus. Speaking of grappling, I just want to mention a headline. Total, big energy, global energy company, planning to cut investments by $3.3 billion this year. We know those energy companies, as Saudi and others continue to pump more oil into the system, the energy sector just continuing to get hammered. All right, you're listening to Bloomberg Business Week, and this is Bloomberg Radio. Let's get a check on your top business stories and a check on the trading day. Here is once again Doug Krisner.
All right, Carol, we are at higher levels right now, but off the best levels of the day. Right now, Dow Industrial Average is up 1.8% with about an hour remaining in today's session. You were talking about energy earlier. Recovery in crude oil today has many of the big energy names moving to the upside. WTI better by 26% in the extended session here at 25.55. Indications were from President Trump earlier that he would basically withhold from getting involved in the dispute between Saudi Arabia and Iran, this oil price standoff, at this point, and may get involved at an appropriate time. AT&T shares moving to the downside. Right now, the stock is off more than 5.5%. We're told that the company is in discussion with a number of banks for a new term loan of roughly $3 billion. Many of the companies like AT&T have been struggling to get their short-term financing needs taken care of because of the market seizure in that what is known as the commercial paper market. This is one of the reasons that the Fed was addressing the problem earlier in the week. Dow Industrial Average right now better by 1.2%. S&P 500 higher by 1.3%. NASDAQ Composite climbing by about 3.7%. Some of the big cap tech names moving higher today. I'm speaking about names like Tesla, Netflix, and Facebook, all pushing to the upside. In the bond market today, long-term interest rates coming down. 10-year Treasury right now is at a yield of 1.2%. In terms of some of the eco data that we had, and this may not come as a big surprise, first-time jobless claims, big jump last week. Claims now at a level of 281,000 as the economy just begins to show signs of weakening under the effects of the corona epidemic. And a regional gain of manufacturing from the Philly Fed suffering its largest ever drop for the month of March. Now, where the dollar is concerned, we're seeing a rally against the majors. Looking at the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index, higher by about 1.5%. We've got a weaker yen here, down about 2.3% at 110.65, and the euro coming in by more than 2.2% against the buck at $1.675. So there you have it. You are caught up on markets. I'm Doug Krisner.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, let's do a little bit of Business Week economics. We got the team assembled. Kathleen Hayes, Global Economics and Policy Editor for Bloomberg. Carl Riccadonna, Chief U.S. Economist, joining us from New York and New Jersey, respectively. Kathleen, I want to start with you. Different tone today, it feels like, in the markets. Tell us about it.
Well, you've got that, somewhat of a move up in stocks. That's a relief, isn't it? See if it holds at the close. But so bonds have definitely advanced in terms of price a bit higher, yields a bit lower again. Nevertheless, I think you look at the 10-year note, you have to say it's maybe pegged to a new level, maybe something around 1.115, the yield around 1.12 now, 30-year bond around 1.76 historically, still very low bond yields. But I think the big news of the past 24 hours is, once again, central banks are doing everything they can to put stability and liquidity in financial markets, show investors, show traders, show the world that we're here. I mean, you could start with the Fed's, I'm sure you talked about already, the money market mutual fund assistance they announced late yesterday afternoon. That led into the results of the European Central Bank's emergency meeting where Christine Lagarde pulled out her own bazooka 750 billion euros of bond purchases through the end of the year. We had then the Bank of England cutting its key rate to 0.1% overnight. The Reserve Bank of Australia cut its key rate to 0.25. That's their effective lower bound that opens the door to quantitative easing bond purchases, except that Phil Lowe at RBA did something interesting. He's pegging the 3-year bond yield at 0.25% and talking about keeping yields where they are for several years. And the Fed comes out today with, these dollar swap lines, keep a lot of dollar liquidity in the world with 9 more central banks. So the central banks are on the move. They're on the march. And it just seems like this is not stopping until they get the result they want.
They're throwing everything out there. Come on in, Carl Riccadonna, because we also did get some economic news. Our chief U.S. economist with Bloomberg Economics joining us on the phone as well. Carl, you heard what Kathleen say. Come on in on what you're seeing and what you think is important for our listeners.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I think it's very encouraging to see the European Central Bank coming on board with an appropriately sized package. Certainly last week's press conference with Christine Lagarde was a huge disappointment. I mean, every central banker's worst nightmare is that markets go limit down while they're speaking, and her press conference certainly cast some considerable doubt as to whether the Europeans were rising to the occasion. Certainly the extent of market shock in the meantime seems to have brought them to the table with a package that's more akin to what the Fed has offered. So just to see everyone kind of moving in synchronous fashion is reassuring. That being said, Kathleen made an excellent point here that the Fed is trying to stabilize financial conditions. We're not even thinking of stimulating the economy at this point. It's just ensuring that markets are clearing in a deep and liquid fashion, that treasuries are trading smoothly. And once you have treasuries operating smoothly, money market funds smoothly, commercial paper markets operating smoothly, you can then work further out the risk spectrum. And that's how you then start to think of the economy kind of regaining its footing. In the meantime, as we saw with today's data from the Philadelphia Fed survey, and also more importantly from jobless claims, the economy is on the cusp of a very deep dive at the end of the first quarter, and more importantly into the second quarter. First quarter, we got through really 2 months before the shock started to hit, at least in the U.S. economy. In the second quarter, we're looking for something that now is going to rival kind of the darkest days of the Great Recession in 2008, 2009.
And Carl, are you and the team starting to get a sense of how to model this at all, or when you might get the data that start to show the depth of what you're talking about?
Well, what my team is doing at the moment is going line by line through the GDP accounts and looking at what categories would be hit very hard and what categories would not tend to be impacted. So we can think of things like motor vehicle sales. Not many people heading to dealerships to buy a car right now, or probably through most of the second quarter. Although spending on services like financial services or movie rental sites and that sort of stuff, utility payments, those categories tend to be much more resilient. So we're kind of looking at past behaviors and looking at kind of a realistic scenario and a worst case scenario for what will happen to the economy in the second quarter. The numbers aren't pretty, and we haven't published them yet. That's coming up tomorrow morning, first thing. But I will say this. The numbers are bad enough that it is very clear that the $1 trillion kind of price tag that we're tagging on stimulus packages at the moment is going to be appropriately sized. That doesn't push the economy back into firm growth this year. It just avoids a disastrous quarter from spreading into the back half of the year.
Well, and I think that's what it's about at this point, Kathleen. We were talking earlier with some of our guests. I mean, the whole idea of, is this a 1 quarter? Is this 2 quarters? Is this something that this is 2020, and it's not something we see turn until maybe 2021?
Well, here's the issue, I think. If the fiscal authorities, and again, this isn't the Fed's job. When Steve Mnuchin comes in and talks about, helping the airlines, and he's going to give them loans, not grants, et cetera. That's what the federal government, that's what Congress has to decide. And I think the point is, if you can build a bridge, an economic bridge that will keep consumers, households, families afloat, that will keep companies that are otherwise in decent shape, would not be going down the tube afloat, then I think you've got a bridge, maybe to the third quarter, maybe the second half of the year, where people can kind of put their heads up and start doing things again. The problem is if too many people suffer, if too many jobs are lost, if companies who get bailed out aren't forced to sign on the bottom line, we're not laying off our workers. If companies that otherwise would survive don't, I think that's when you get to the second half and you're flat and maybe you're still in recession. And that's what the Fed and the federal government should try to avoid.
Well, and I can't remember
Kathleen's point.
Yeah, go ahead.
To Kathleen's point, we're already seeing those signs of strain, right? Jobless claims corresponding to last week, before we even really started to see much of a shutdown, aside from in Washington State, already surged dramatically higher. I suspect that next week's jobless claims will be the worst we've seen in the last 20 years.
Can I just say, though, don't you lay people off so they can get their unemployment benefits?
Absolutely, they're being laid off, but the unemployment check does not come close to matching the paycheck they would have gotten otherwise.
Guys, we got to wrap because a lot going on. Kathleen Hayes, Carl Riccadonna, thank you so much. Let's get back to World and National News headlines and Bob Moon. Hi, Bob.
Hi, Carol. Jason, at the latest briefing of the White House Coronavirus Task Force today, President Trump laid the blame for the global pandemic directly on China, saying the Asian nation did not publicize the problem quickly enough. Pressed by a reporter about why the U.S. wasn't prepared for testing, Trump replied by blaming the media.
We were very prepared. The only thing we weren't prepared for was the media. The media has not treated it fairly.
Trump also had praise for the cruise ship industry after Carnival said it would make ships from its 4 brands available to serve as temporary hospitals in locations that need them to combat the new coronavirus. At today's briefing, Food and Drug Administration Commissioner Dr. Stephen Hahn talked about promising treatment options, including an anti-malaria drug called chloroquine.
That's a drug that the president has directed us to take a closer look at as to whether an expanded use approach to that could be done to actually see if that benefits patients.
President Trump was even more effusive in his praise of chloroquine, calling it very promising and suggesting a drug for treating coronavirus patients should be available, as he put it, immediately. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy says 4 more people have died from the coronavirus, 3 in nursing homes, bringing the state's total to 9. Its total number of confirmed cases rose to more than 700, and Murphy says he thinks the figure will rise into the many thousands. Murphy also signed an executive order postponing numerous elections until May 12th. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Bob Moon.
Europe, stability, and constant evolution. Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Your job is going to be even more important, I'd argue.
Experience with consistent information.
Would it be a policy mistake if global central banks signaled a more dovish stance?
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
So how do you tackle that? What's your mechanism?
Weekdays at 1 a.m. Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
My mother was always very active and independent, and she was familiar with her neighborhood. But one day, she stopped at the stop sign for much longer than usual. She wasn't even really sure where she was at.
It's important for you to talk to someone about it. I felt so much better after my son told me, Mom, we'll figure it out.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
The Bloomberg Business of Sports podcast.
How did the Yankees become this mega valuable team?
Where the money is flowing inside sports around the globe.
From the marketing perspective, where are the dollars spent?
From union heads to team owners, Scott Soshnick and Michael Barr speak to the names that power this multi-billion-dollar industry.
Boston Red Sox CEO Sam Kennedy.
National Hockey League Commissioner Gary Bettman.
Bloomberg Business of Sports. Listen today on Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
1 in 3 adults has pre-diabetes. 1 in 3. That means it could be you, your football buddy, your football buddy, or you, your best man, your worst man, you, your dog walker, your cat jogger. While 1 in 3 adults has pre-diabetes, with early diagnosis, pre-diabetes can be reversed. Take the risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and its pre-diabetes awareness partners.
This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, I'll talk with the author of a fictional story about a global pandemic that right now feels all too real.
All I did was just drew upon the trends. I just extended them. Unfortunately, real life seems to have outraced even some of my imagination.
Lawrence Wright joins me on the New Yorker Radio Hour from WNYC Studios. Listen to this episode on TuneIn today.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
The best job candidate isn't always the typical candidate. Sometimes they're a grad of life.
Meet the grads of life. Young adults of unique determination and experience. An ideal fit for your company in an entry-level position, internship, or mentorship. They might not have every qualification you typically look for, but they're exactly who your company needs.
Sometimes the best candidates aren't the ones you're used to.
Go to gradsoflife.org to learn how to find, cultivate, and train this great pool of untapped talent. Brought to you by the Ad Council and gradsoflife.org.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President, Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
So some of the rally that we had in the U.S. equity market earlier in today seems to be running out of gas a little bit. We're about 43 minutes now from the closing bell. The Dow holding on to a slim gain of about 0.6%. In the broader market, the S&P is higher by nearly 1%. Want to look at some of the consumer discretionary names today, particularly the casino companies, which are rallying. I'm talking about Wynn Resorts, MGM, and Las Vegas Sands. Those stocks all up in the vicinity of about 10% each. Also want to bring your attention to shares of Ford. The stock is down a little bit more than 3% right now. The company saying earlier that it was going to suspend its dividend and the company notifying investors that it intends to fully draw down on 2 separate credit lines worth about $15.4 billion totally. AT&T is set to be in discussion with a number of banks about a new term loan. It would be worth about $3 billion. This is in an effort to kind of secure the cash reserves that the company wants to keep on hand and to make up for the fact that what is known as the commercial paper market, this is the short-term IOU market that corporations use for a lot of their short-term funding, that's been having a lot of difficulty. And so AT&T is said to be in discussions with banks now for a new term loan facility. In the NASDAQ market, the composite index better by about 4%, and the U.S. 10-year Treasury yielding 1.14%. That's markets. Let's get back to Bloomberg Business Week.
Doug, thanks a lot. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Well, it's a team sport when it comes to covering Wall Street. We know that at Bloomberg. Earlier in the week, we talked to Max Abelson about Wall Street being blindsided. Today, that tough guy culture. And as I said earlier in the week, few know this culture like Max Abelson does. He, as I said, worked on a great team to do this. Michelle Davis, Linan Nguyen, and Sri Natarajan, all giving you a sense of, man, this macho culture, Max, not going well amid this virus outbreak. Tell us what you found.
Talking to you, Jason, I can honestly tell you improves my spirits, and I've been feeling low today. I'm not kidding. So you're so right. It's so nice to be reminded that I work on such a great team. And a quick shout out to Stefania and our rotator Olivia and Polly. It really did take a lot of people to get the snapshot, and what our snapshot of Wall Street showed. And honestly, this in some ways really came to us. It's not as if we were not chasing this. Was that we found, actual fevers on the trading floor of Goldman Sachs, which, as a bank, like all other big banks, the message from the top is, if you're feeling sick, go home.
Yeah.
But what we're finding is that there's this really purebred Wall Street pressure. Now, some of this pressure, Jason, is internal from people who are making themselves feel this way, and some of the pressure is coming from middle managers or people's bosses to get to work and to literally get into the office, even when the demands of the public health crisis is to stay at home. People are feeling pressure on Wall Street, those nonstop demands to get into the office, and that's the strange dynamic during a deadly pandemic.
God, the one line in your story about how bankers are saying that privately they're saying that they would be relieved if the markets would temporarily shut because then they can, if they're not feeling well, go home and not have any kind of consequences. But it does speak to the culture. We think so much has changed, from decades ago, from Wall Street, the movie, but there's still a lot of that out there.
Look, I think you're right, and I just want to. Something about a crisis is so clarifying. It helps you sort of look with clarity on things that we kind of take for granted. I think it's important that as journalists, Carol, I've gotten to know you so well over the years, Jason, you as well. It's important that we acknowledge among ourselves that there's a pressure in journalism too to sort of embrace a moment and the cooking no matter what. And I think that it's a cousin to that same Wall Street culture. And it's certainly we're seeing it all around. It's not just, by the way, inside the big banks in Midtown. Michelle Davis, my favorite anecdote that Michelle Davis has ever gotten, probably is in this story. She found people in Milwaukee who had to go into their office at JP Morgan, watching the Wells Fargo workers in a nearby building bring their computers out to go home, and these people wanted to go home too, but their bosses wouldn't let them.
Yeah. I have to say, Max, reading your story, I felt the same way. I do feel like that there is something in the media world, the same thing that, we don't run away from fires. We jump into them, and when there is a crisis, we all kind of want to be out there reporting on it and be involved. And I think it's very similar. And I think there is pressure to, be there, and because this is our job. This is what we signed up to do.
I think that the compromise, a compromise that not just exists within capitalism, but exists within, being healthy and being members of a public health community, is to work as hard as you want to, but to work from home when the government and when companies are telling us to, and know that that's not physically possible for literally everyone. You know, my college roommate, Tom Canal, is a nurse right now in East New York, and it was the grocery worker at Union Market around the corner from me in Park Slope here in Brooklyn are behind the counter. Not everyone has the luxury to earn a paycheck while working from home too. Jeff Green, our Bloomberg colleague, wrote a story with Michelle Davis about 100 million workers in America who don't have paid sick leave. Of course, a shout out to our colleagues in Seattle who wrote an amazing story I highly recommend to all our listeners about the drivers for your Amazon packages. Are you folks listening, ordering Amazon packages? And I know I am. Amazon deliverers got one wipe each from their boss before their shifts saying good luck. Yeah. I think it's just a reality that's across Wall Street, but across corporate America right now. It's absolutely fascinating to see.
It absolutely is, and it's a must-read. Not surprisingly, one of the most read stories in the terminal because it goes straight to the heart of Wall Street culture where you make your living. Max, we're so grateful to you. And, you know, these are the sorts of conversations that we need to keep having to some extent because I will say from a personal perspective, Carol, social distancing is successful, I think, more so when there's peer pressure. You know, when people essentially are able to say, hey, great to see you, but if you don't mind, I'm just going to step back here a little bit, or I'm not going to take my kid to a playground, or I'm not going to do this sorts of things. Like, all of us being in this together means we have to sort of be out there and sometimes make the tough choices.
But I also think, and going back to media, like I think there's been pressure on myself because I wanted to be involved watching it, you know, not being kind of missing the story and not being involved in the story. We put that pressure also on ourselves as well. So, yeah, I mean, this is, I keep saying New World Order. I mean, we're trying to find our way through this and we'll see what kind of lasting impact. We keep saying that there'll be a lasting impact on Wall Street and the financial community, but time will tell on that. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week, also watching on YouTube. I'm Carol Masser along with Jason Kelly, and this is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks are narrowly higher in the final hour, but the market has dug itself a deep hole, and analysts are not yet ready to say it has reached bottom. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 77, the S&P 500 up 15, the Nasdaq Composite is up 229. Boston Fed President Eric Rosengren sees a strong comeback for the U.S. economy at some point, but he tells Bloomberg COVID-19 has delivered a real economic shock. He sees layoffs growing in the weeks ahead. With demand for air travel slowing to a trickle, one analyst thinks airlines should shut down. Cowen's Helene Becker tells Barron's the industry should park its planes, furlough workers, and preserve cash until travel can resume. Homebuilder Lennar is trying to keep business moving by offering buyers drive-through closings. Buyers of completed homes can complete their paperwork without ever leaving their cars. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
What if you could keep the top economic experts in a conference room next to your office without having to feed them?
Do we need better optics? Do we need some substance? Do CEOs care about ESG?
We have seen quite a lot of stimulus pumped into the system already.
It's the biggest warning yet about the financial risks of climate change.
Now there are more ways to hear us. Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and at BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
Live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at beyondido.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation and the Ad Council.
Why is delivering the best client experience a top priority at BNY Mellon's Pershing? Michelle Feinstein, Director of Client Engagement, explains.
Today's investors want a financial relationship that's on demand, customized, and leverages the latest digital technology. At BNY Mellon's Pershing, helping advisory firms and broker-dealers create great experiences for their clients is our priority. Through our integrated wealth experience, we give you a high-touch service, flexible technology choices, and expert insights, so you can deliver a highly personalized experience to your clients at every step, from onboarding to wealth planning, to performance analysis and more. And because we're part of BNY Mellon, you'll benefit from more than 230 years of strength and stability. At Pershing, we're personally invested in your success.
Visit Pershing.com to learn more about Pershing's integrated wealth experience. Pershing LLC and Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC are both members of FINRA and SIPC.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
Jelly. Jelly adjective. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org, brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt US Kids, and the Ad Council.
Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrell.
Is that good for American finance?
What is happening with the head count?
Right, where it counts. Bloomberg Surveillance, weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Broadcasting live to New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Massar along with Jason Kelly, both of us from our respective homes on this Thursday. And just taking a look at the VIX, it's down 8% as stocks move higher. We've got an interesting chart of the day with our own Dave Wilson about the VIX. So, Jason, we're going to talk about that in just a moment.
Love me some Dave Wilson. Can't wait to get to that. First, let's get to Doug Krisner. He's got an update on that trade. Still in the green, Doug.
Yeah, we are. And let's get to the VIX because, yes, we are down 8.5%, but on a relative basis, we're still elevated. I think Dave Wilson may agree with me on that or not. We're about to find out. Right now, the VIX at a level of 70. Equities are trading at higher levels. We are off the best level of the day, however, with the Dow showing a gain of 1%. In the broader market, S&P 500 better by about 1.3%. Consumer discretionary higher. We can't forget the energy complex because we've got a recovery in the price of crude oil today, which is powering some of the energy stocks to the upside. WTI right now in the extended session is up more than 25%. We're trading 25.35. That's New York crude oil. We also have many of the big cap tech stocks, names like Tesla, Netflix, and Facebook moving to the upside, and that's helping to send the NASDAQ composite to a gain of nearly 3.8% right now. Over in the bond market, 10-year Treasury coming in by about 5 basis points in yield, 1.14%. The dollar continues to soar with the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index right now up 1.5%. This has created, on the flip side, a much weaker yen here at 110.88.
All right, Doug, thanks a lot. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week right here on Bloomberg Radio.
Here you go, way too fast. Don't slow down, you're gonna crash. You don't know what's been going.
This is really a pop song for Dave Wilson.
Well, I got to tell you, our
something
producers,
from the 80s,
our
right?
producers picked this one, and I'm grateful for it. I mean, it's got some movement, that's for sure.
Okay.
What band is that, Dave?
I believe it's the Primitives. At least that's what Donnie Holloway, who's in the studio, tells me. And it's called Crash.
Well, there you go.
I mean,
so how does this relate to volatility, the VIX, your chart? Talk to us.
Okay, let's be clear here. What I decided to look at was not the VIX, which is based on the value of S&P 500 index options. I went to the volatility of the index itself. So in other words, we're talking about swings in stocks over time. And so the shortest time period that people look at on a regular basis is 10 days. And, you look at how things fluctuate. You come up with a reading, and it's something you can use to give you a sense of what's happening in the stock market as opposed to the options market where the VIX is calculated. And, in fact, that volatility reading, even though stocks have kind of settled down today, is actually up. It's at 123.7%. And why does that number matter? Because you've only seen 2 times when there has been a higher number in the history of the S&P 500 that goes back to the 1920s. I actually mentioned this at the top of the show yesterday, and the chart is really sort of the picture that gives you that historical reference. The only 2 times, the aftermath of the Black Monday crash in October 1987 and the aftermath of the Black Tuesday crash in October 1929. So what it comes down to really is if you want to call what's happened in the past month a crash, you got history on your side. This particular indicator shows just how dramatic things have been over the past month. So if you want to know more, folks, send me an email. I'll get you the chart, the explanation that goes with it, and everything I do going forward. The email address is dwilson@bloomberg.net. That's dwilson@bloomberg.net.
Okay, so not the VIX, the actual volatility of the index itself.
Yeah, you threw me with that, I have to say.
Sorry, I threw everybody apparently with that one. What's the correlation between them, Dave? And I guess more importantly, when based on what you are looking at, what does it tell us about what's to come?
Well, I mean, a lot of times you see that the VIX has a higher reading than the volatility of the index itself. Let me give you sort of a reference point. If you go back and look at the VIX at the peak last month for the S&P 500, when we saw the record, it was at about 14.4. The 10-day volatility reading on the S&P 500 was less than 7. It really shows you how dramatic it's been in the past month. We've gone from 7 to 123.7. I mean, you're talking about a 17-fold increase. VIX tends to be higher, but in this situation, well, it certainly hasn't been. This particular 10-day reading. I mean, you can pick all kinds of time periods, but the 10-day is the most sensitive to sort of the day-to-day fluctuations in the market.
Wow. Well, I mean, look, we're all trying to get our heads around how to measure this, how to put it up against historicals. I feel like every day, Dave, I at least am bugging you to say, well, what's this like? How does this compare? Which is why your chart of the day is so helpful. I'm just saying.
Well,
it provides a lot of good context.
Just to give you a sense of today, right? From the start of last week, the biggest move we had is 12%, the smallest, which was Wednesday of last week, 4.9%. That's up or down. So we're actually settling down today, and yet because you have the oldest reading coming out and the newest one going in, the historical 10-day volatility is still up for the index, even on a day like today.
So I guess one thing that we can say for certainty, right, Dave, is just there's a ton of volatility. It's just everything is swinging in a lot of different directions. And we really, it's a little bit calmer today. But as you said, if you pick out some of those individual names, there's some big moves to the upside. So.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you just look, they're all over the place. When you have Tesla up 19.5% as an example, you see Schlumberger, the oil services company, up 14.5%. And I'm literally sort of just picking out a couple of examples. There are plenty more like that. In fact, my stock of the day, which is coming up in less than half an hour, will be another one.
Deep tease from Dave Wilson. All right, Dave, we'll see you on the other side of the close. We'll see if the major indices, certainly seems like the NASDAQ is going to hold its gains, and the S&P now hanging in there as well. Meanwhile, Carol Masser, I do feel like we're catching our breath a little bit. Obviously keeping a close eye on headlines, virus related, and we are seeing, going back to Ryan Teague Beckwith and even some of that call that we were hearing between the president, the vice president, and governors, a sense of action, a sense of maybe not as much urgency as some would hope, but there are things happening.
Well, absolutely. I was just, who lives in Pennsylvania was just messaging and said, I think we might be, sheltering in place. So we are seeing, again, mayors, governors, kick into action about certain, especially, the more vulnerable or more hard-hit areas. All right, let's get back to World and National News headlines. For that, let's bring in, once again, Bob Moon in our 1130 newsroom.
Carol, negotiations continue on Capitol Hill to craft an economic stimulus that will put federal money where it's most needed. Bloomberg's Irv Chapman reports from Washington.
Congress should funnel money to businesses that suddenly stop getting customers and are therefore running out of cash. Neil Bradley of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce said in a Bloomberg interview.
Businesses across the country, virtually from every industrial sector, are beginning to face a liquidity crisis as revenue dries up. And if we want to avoid massive layoffs, then we need to do some quick actions to help them be able to continue to support their employees.
Bradley urged banks to keep credit going to businesses that qualified in January, but based on current conditions might not, with a federal backstop available. In Washington, Irv Chapman, Bloomberg Radio.
New York City's biggest construction contractor association is urging Mayor Bill de Blasio to keep construction sites open. The Building Trades Employers Association says other city leaders have defined construction as an essential service and have exempted the trade for work stoppages in other parts of the country. Democratic Representative Ben McAdams has tested positive for coronavirus and is now under self-quarantine in his Salt Lake City home. He told NBC's Today he feels terrible.
I'm feeling pretty bad. I think this is probably the worst cold I've ever had, but we're getting by.
Some lawmakers have asked for electronic voting, but both the House and Senate leaders have rejected that idea. Global News 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. I'm Bob Moon.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
25 years ago, NJ
graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
In-depth analysis.
This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, I'll talk with the author of a fictional story about a global pandemic that right now feels all too real.
All I did was just drew upon the trends. I just extended them. Unfortunately, real life seems to have outraced even some of my imagination.
Lawrence Wright joins me on the New Yorker Radio Hour from WNYC Studios. Listen to this episode on TuneIn today.
Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential and change, our industry specialists will maximize SCI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SCI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/C's Change.
Hi, we're the Goo Goo Dolls. We're fortunate that our daughters have what they need to grow and learn. But that isn't the case for nearly 13 million kids in the U.S. who struggle with hunger.
Childhood hunger is a heartbreaking reality that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and provides it to families and children in need.
You can help kids in need in your community by visiting feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
So we got about 12 and a half minutes to go in the Thursday session. We are positive in equities right now, off session highs. S&P 500 better by about 1.7%. If you use the Bloomberg terminal, the WEI function will get you to world equity indices. You click on the S&P 500, and you can see relative strength today in consumer discretionary names. And if you go within that group, you'll look at the restaurants, names like McDonald's, Starbucks, Chipotle, all pushing to the upside. Right now, Mickey D's pushing up by more than 8%. Starbucks greater by more than 10%. And we have Chipotle shares rising nearly 17%. Also, energy, a very, very positive spot for the market, given a rally in crude oil today. Right now in the extended session, WTI up 25%. We're trading about 25.40 in active WTI. So the S&P holding on to a gain right now of about 1.7%. NASDAQ Composite, meantime, better by just about 4%. If you look at what's happening in the bond market, yields on the 10-year Treasury down about 3.5 basis points. We're at 1.15%. The dollar continues to advance against the majors, with the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index rising 1.3%. Got a weaker yen, 110.82, and a weaker euro against the dollar at $1.0670. So a lot of positivity on the equity side. We'll see it as it holds, or if it holds, as we make our way to the closing bell. Let's get back to Bloomberg Business Week.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive? Oh, no.
Who's gonna drive you home?
Honey, please, I'll do the driving.
Drive on.
Excuse me, I want to drive.
Just drive, baby.
It's the question that drives us.
This is the Drive to the Close.
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
On Bloomberg Radio.
It is time for the Drive to the Close on this Thursday. Doug, of course, just breaking down the numbers. We've got just about 10 minutes, left in today's trading session. Lamar Villery is back with us, portfolio manager at Villery Funds. They've got roughly $2 billion in assets under management. Lamar joining us on the phone from New Orleans. So, Lamar, good to have you here on a day where we're actually seeing some gains in the equity markets. Talk to me a little bit about this environment, because you guys have been having a tough time, to be fair, in terms, I'm just looking at some of the performances that you've had. I think year to date you're down 26%. I know the whole market, but even if I go back a little bit longer, what's been tough about managing in this environment?
Sure. Well, obviously it's a tale of two markets. We held up pretty well last year. Really, the big lag last year was that we were overweight cash, which was, last year was a year where you could buy anything and it went up. We're still overweight the cash. Now, we are a small cap manager, and small caps unfortunately have underperformed so far year to date, and they underperformed last year. So we're swimming against the tide a little bit there. But the nice thing is now we're situated and we've got some cash, and so we're able to do some things that I think unfortunately a lot of our peers are not able to, given the difficulties in the market over the last couple of weeks. But
small caps were up about 24% last year, right?
They were, but they still lagged the large caps significantly. So,
I do want to bring you one headline crossing the Bloomberg right now, confirming some earlier reporting. The State Department telling Americans not to travel abroad, just coming right out and saying that, Carol, that folks should stay at home, stay in the country. And, there was some earlier reporting, I believe, that said if you are overseas and an American, get home or plan to stay where you are, because at some point things are going to get shut down a little bit more.
Well, as my parents would probably have said about this, well, it kind of makes sense, don't you think?
Yeah.
It's a little bit logical. We are talking with Lamar Villery, portfolio manager at Villery Funds. So you were saying, I understand that they lagged, but is there, in terms of positioning, do you feel like in terms of the opportunities that were out there in the small cap universe that you guys just made some misses here?
No, actually, we outperformed the, if you're looking at the balanced fund, we're going to lag, of course, because we hold a bunch of bonds. So all in all, our equities actually outperformed even the S&P, even though we were small cap and kind of swimming upstream and have the cash. Our equities actually have held up fine. Obviously, in the last several weeks, we've had the same challenges as everybody.
And so where do you put money to work here, Lamar?
Sure. So, what we would, there's kind of two, if you're going to put money in the market right now, there's really two schools of thought. Number one is, hey, there are these companies and these stocks that are just massively beat down, that have lost, 70% of their value, some of these restaurant, hospitality, travel stocks. I think there's still too much uncertainty, as you just said, with the State Department announcement. There's still too much uncertainty to understand exactly how deep things could go here. And these companies, a lot of them have a whole lot of debt. So rather than jump into those, I think the better play, or the more the safer and more prudent play right here, is to invest in companies that really aren't impacted by the COVID situation. So companies that even might even be helped and arguably helped by it, but at least aren't hurt by it, but that are still trading significantly off of their highs. So basically, you're looking at premium type quality companies that are trading at a nice little discount here.
So where have you been maybe committing? So are you committing new money, Lamar, or give us an idea in terms of names that you think are interesting at this point and that may be immune from the virus?
Sure. So obviously the healthcare. One of the companies that we hold that's actually traded off and is even down a little bit today in the strong market is a company called Steris.